So this will be the revised agenda for the regular council meeting of April, July 25th, 2022. And it's a little public service announcement here. I would like to acknowledge the passing of Joel Maxwell. Joel worked for the municipality on traffic control. It was twice awarded merited service acknowledgements. One went for the extended refit of our ferry, which was very challenging for her, and she came through just beautifully. She knew how to handle people, and we always remember her as having a lot of spark and always had a smile on her face. And she will be missed. Our sincere condolences to her family and friends. Then we'll move on to the opening of the council meeting. At this time, we acknowledge with gratitude, live, work, and play. Traditional unceded territory, this formal nation, whose people have been stewards of this land and waters surrounding the First item is the approval of the agenda and late items. I think everybody should have them in front of them now. That was it, just the four of them.
Yes.
And anybody want to make any changes?
Where the goals is for?
Well, I can see it through 3, 4 B's. 6,
Oh, right, I see it.
Okay. Anybody have any issues with this? If not, we will approve the agenda by consensus, and we'll move on to public comments. Okay.
So first on our list, we have Ann Silverman, but I don't see her present.
And she's not on.
No, she's not on the Zoom.
Okay, well, let's go to number 2 and maybe she'll show up. Oh, wonderful. Welcome, okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
And Darren informed me about the most recent proposal you have to work. Darren is a good friend and a partner. I have never seen him hurt in a way which he was even not quite frank with me, because he felt he was so hurt that he could not bear it. So he feels betrayed, abused, misled. Because then he gave me the rationale, and not why was he hurt, why he was as a process and the announcement what you had in mind. And that's why I choose to come, just to let you know what it does to develop evil on our on Bowen. We have worked for the last more than 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, but definitely 2 years intensively to come up with a rezoning activity. And we have 4 major sites, and each of those sites have very specific purposes, uses, and vision. Each of them. And each of those sites will cost many, many, many millions to build up. Most of that money has to come either from sales, fees. However, the primary goal of all of that was to do something for affordability, for diversity, for community building, which excludes probably at least 50%, if not more, of the product you create, not for sale, for revenue. And a lot of that revenue does not pay for the investment. That's why the revenue for those is typically subsidized by government. The easiest case is affordable rental. Now, you will probably all aware how the rental situation of Bowen Island is. It's more than that, it's devastating, and we all will pay a dear price. So affordable rental is as elemental to the future of Bowen Island as a community. And I want to use that term a few times. There is no problem creating a place. The most likely outcome, if you proceed with this glorious idea, we will become at least as expensive as Bowen Island, but probably more expensive, but more expensive West Vancouver. If that's your intent, the plan, your willingness to accept, so be it. If that's not your objective, if it's not, then you will have to ask questions. How do we maintain, improve, and have a lasting chance for diversity on this island? Diversity. And diversity includes affordability. Diversity, affordability will hopefully help us to attract the very people we need to exist on this island. And that the mailman and the garbage remover and those people who look after your septic tanks and the builders. Without people who will work for wages, where would you be? And I say, where would we be and where would you be? And you are citizens. You are the same affected like anybody. All those things. Now, if I'm a multimillionaire, I'm not quite qualified for this, but I'm not a poor man. But I would be way more, would have to be way more, let's say, rich to afford to have my own staff living here. We are basically steering towards a feudal society at which, and I did the calculation, our biggest challenge in our rezoning was to establish what can we actually afford. Because anything we want to build which does not pay for itself, and rentals and all those other learning facilities, community facilities, you name it, they all cost money. Money you either have, and then who would spend it on something like that? Not people who manage money. So you have to earn it. And the only way for developing money is by selling. And they can do well. But if you sell all the product, then there is no rental. So you have to have a balance. And that balance, I tell you, is scale. Because you commit to a certain ratio of rental. You don't know what it will cost you to build. You don't know what your rent will be. And then how much interest will you have to pay? So you're starting to gamble on a gigantic, unpredictable outcome. Gigantic in its risk. So why would you do that? Well, and that's why I'm emotionally hurt. Darren is hurt. We love this island. We take great pride of building community. And it took us 2 years to come up with a plan. We said, yes, that is. Except we had to step back. Falling in love with the project is one thing. Can we afford it? It took about 6 months and very expensive people to analyze it all. What did they say? Yeah, well, I'm not sure what the purpose of your business is. From a financial point, from an economic point, from a business point, it doesn't make sense. However, can it be done? Yes. if you consider it yourself a not-for-profit, yes, so you're not risking to go broke in the middle of the year. That would be cool. Try to do something good and then you go broke. No. Okay. Knowing that, we were preparing for the rezoning application. And then this proposal is, oh yeah, well, now from now on, because of a covenant or whatever initiative, you're expected to give up 50% of your land. All right. 50%. So then everything we have worked on for the last 2 years is out of the window, and not only questionable, we would not even have the courage to ask the same consultants, because they would say, you're nuts. Because in order to do that, you have to increase the density, and yes, you can do it, but then we would suggest you do it the way they do it to make money. Not a bad deal. And now, what are we doing? We have one proposal on which we work for 2 years, which we love and think would be a real benefit for Bowen Island, and it's off the table because we can afford it. Not because we don't want it. No, it is. It might be your decision. Or you say, well, yeah, well, let's make a deal. 50% good enough. We build what Bowen Island has always done. And then, yes, the starter home of Bowen Island, is probably 2.5 million. And maybe 3-4 years, it's 3 million. Who cares? Because that's, and some of you may be quite familiar with doing calculation. Just figure out what it costs to create the land, create the infrastructure, build, and then sell it. Do that. In order to come out, sure, the easiest. Cut it in chunks, put a house on, and the fewer homes, the better. Build palaces, chalets. Why sacrifice, abuse this side of 60 acres for affordable housing and three-store and attached housing, row housing? Why? Divide it into 15 estates. Have a stable and a riding ring, and your own pools, everything. It will be sold before you have started building. Yeah, it costs 15 million, 20 million, 25 million. Who cares? The buyers are there. No problem. So now we, after 2 years of work, which has cost us the money, we finally saw we had it. And then we say, oh no, they want to have 50%. 50% on what? And what are we doing with the rest? Oh yeah. It will be best thank you. Just not just to take steps more than the plan over there. The decision about that rests with you. The rezoning application hasn't been filed, and it would be followed by another rezoning application where we put down all the proposal for affordable housing university for transportation. Do you know what it takes to actually make Bowen Island somewhat neutral in its carbon footprint? Do anyone can dream what that would mean? How our transportation modes have to change? How do you do that? And how do you create more jobs on Bowen Island so that we don't depend on commuters? Commuting is not fun. Maybe one of you likes it, but most people, they hate it. And it pollutes. And if you add 2.5 sometimes only 2, but sometimes 3 hours per week over 20, 30 years. It cuts years out of your life. You sit in your car on the ferry, on the highway, pollute and spend money. And all we have to do, change our transportation system. And we create local jobs so that Bowen Islanders work on the island. It was all part of our reason. You could have read it and you would hopefully like it. And then the public would have decided, yea or nay. The public has no chance to do that anymore. No. Now, you will, in your decision, if you go with this wonderful proposal, say, well, West Vancouver, it shall be. Sorry for my somewhat emotional outburst here. But you better get it. If you don't, no, I'm not threatening. If you don't, the future will judge, not I. It's up to you.
Thank you, Wolfgang. All right, is that it?
That's it.
Your question?
Yeah, great question.
Okay.
So thanks, Wolfgang. Really impassioned. I appreciate what you're saying. So I quickly read Darren's letter, and he supports the idea of clustering, sort of like the general frame of what we're talking about, or what the policy is talking about, but feels that if the, and so I'm asking you this question, that if the amendment suggested by the APC, that the 50% is a goal, but that it could be changed relative to other amenities that could be provided. I mean, would that change this from, I have no idea what your rezoning proposal offers, what the amenities would be, but would that change this? Is that what? In other words, you agree with Darren's point?
Let's say we have 100 acres or 150, let's say 100 acres, so easy. If you have to give up 50 acres, you have only 50 acres left. Now, if you have now only 25 acres for the rental, we need at least 50 acres for that. So that whole equation doesn't work. So what you're doing, instead of providing rental homes, affordable housing, you will create more space not used by anything other than renewable. And if you, and we will pretty soon commission a map, if you look at any of our island maps, just have it before your eye right now, and you see it's one sea of green. And we have identified little pockets. We will now commission a big map where we can actually count the houses and read the floor of the footprint and so on. The percentage of development taking up space is so minuscule relative to the space. It's ridiculous. It's, oh, we need more space. If we have one thing in abundance of space. So now you analyze this vastness of space. What of that vast space is actually suitable to be built on? I'm not sure if it's 10%, 15%, 20%, I don't know. We will find out. So that is the only area which would be suitable for us to be used. Much of that we gave already as parkaway and for golf course and roads and all these wonderful things. That's gone. So now the land which we still have to develop, cut it out. Sure, if we don't have to build any affordable housing, no problem. But for us to build and not address the fundamental need on Bowen Island, I would not say it would be immoral. I would take it as an insult not being able to do that.
Sorry, Wolfgang, I want you to answer my question.
Okay.
Because first of all, there's nobody on this council that wants this to be a place that is only for wealthy people. So we all have that concern. But so I'm asking you the question again, if that 50% was goal of some sort, but if there are other amenities that could be provided, we all know that housing, affordable housing is the most important thing that's missing on Bowen Island right now. Everyone on this council knows it. We all know it, you know. So that's the question I'm asking you. Would this?
I would not know what other amenities.
Other amenities would be the affordable housing.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
But see, we don't know that.
Yeah, you don't know it.
Problem is, we don't know, you haven't put the application in, we don't know how it's gonna be handled. If 50% is a goal, okay, that's all. And there could be some other amenities that can be adjusted. But I get what you're saying, but I don't think right now, until you actually put that in and, you know, have a look at it, I don't think that you're dealing with sort of the facts.
Well, we know the facts, and we know that we cannot abide by them. So if you want to have the rezoning application, as long as this is pending, no. But what I can assure you, and that's not just get it right, this is not an assurance to please you. This is an unveiled threat. We will publicize our rezoning attempt, our plan, so that anybody on Bowen Island will know what they could have gotten. Okay,
That serves no purpose.
and, oh yes, it will, because then you may actually, but to give you the plan now, at this point, if you had waited, you would postpone that, to do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
you don't need to threaten it. We all,
Yeah.
we all,
Gonna wrap this up too, okay?
you still haven't answered my question. Like if.
So what's the
if this was
question?
What Darren said, in other words, if there was more flexibility, so that the 50% was, as Gary just said, you know, yeah, we'd like to see that. But if there are other amenities such as.
Instead of.
affordable housing, Instead of. In other words, if that flexibility was built into this, so there was flexibility to provide another amenity, and the most important is affordable housing, would then that be okay?
Yeah, but that is part of the rezoning application.
Yes.
So you want to know what the application will be without having an application?
No. No, I'm just asking if we amended the policy the way that the APC suggests, this is what Darren said in his letter, would that be okay?
I would say that would be not only okay, that would probably be a very wise way to go.
Okay, thank you.
But then.
Okay, talk to the.
Yeah.
That's a wrap. Okay, we certainly understand where you're coming from.
And was. Okay.
Thank you, okay.
Take care.
You're not gonna hang around, was it?
No. And that's it for the public comments.
Exams.
No.
So we'll move on to the consent agenda. Does anybody have anything in there? We do have another issue at 3.4 Bravo is the noise exemption for the wedding at Bowen Island Lodge, Thursday, July 28th, which I think everybody has. That'll go on at 3.4B. Yes. We can have a look at that. Does anybody have any issues with anything they'd like to pull here? Okay, all right. The recommendation of council approve the items as outlined in the July 25th, 2022 consent agenda as amended, and I'll move that. And second, thank you, Michael, and all in favor. Okay, great. Then we'll move right into delegations.
So we have.
On screen.
Oh, they're good. They're there.
They're joining us on screen.
Super duper.
Oh, hi, everybody. Can you hear me? It's Robin Fenton.
Here you go.
Okay. Great. My apologies in advance. Classic Bowen Island. I'm in the ferry lineup in my car. And my day went kind of sideways. So what I'm going to do is try to share the presentation. The ferry is just unloading now. And as I'm going through it, we also have, I believe, Megan with us from Lookout Society. Yep. So when the ferry calls to load, I may abruptly pause and throw it over to Megan, and she can introduce you to the Lookout Society. So it might be slightly disjointed. Let me see if I can share my screen here. There we go. Hopefully this works. Share. So today is, and I apologize, it's not going to be in presentation mode. I don't know if I'll be able to do that quickly enough here. Maybe I can. Let's see.
Hello, Megan.
Let's try. Oh, no, that's not going to work. All right, let's leave it here. You can hopefully see it well enough. Yep. So the purpose of today's delegation is to give you an update on the project as it is. So this is the project at 1033 Miller Road, which is the part of lot 3. So it's next to, I think everybody's familiar with the site. Let me go through it here. I'll come to the site in a moment. So as most of you know, who Birch is, we're Bowen Island Resilient Community Housing, a registered nonprofit and a grassroots organization that started here on Bowen. Our vision is that every Bowen Island community member has access to a safe and healthy home. And our mission is to create diverse housing options for Bowen Island, contributing to a successful community with a resilient population. I've listed here our I'm executive director, and I've listed our board of directors, which of course I can come back to and if you need to. You can definitely find more information at our website, which is birchhousing.org. So the project that we've been talking about for many years now is 1033 Miller Road. Oh, that's a typo there. So I think we're all familiar with it. It's the site of Community Lands Lot 3, next to the new fire hall, next to the health center, which is under construction. And so just a very quick overview. I think I've presented this before. So back in 2006, this project started and we evolved into becoming Birch. In 2018, we partnered with the municipality. 2019, we sort of allocated the land. And then through 2019 and 2020, we were able to get lots of funding from the community foundation, from the municipality, from Van City Foundation. We also got some from CMHC federally. We got some from BC Housing provincially, which was wonderful. We hired the consultant team. We have schematic design of the building, and that's complete now. And then in 2021, in January, we applied and submitted our application for the BC Housing Community Housing Fund. In June, we were told of the decision that we were not successful in receiving that funding. We were also in very good company. Out of, I believe, the 190 applications, only approximately 40 were funded, something like that. So many of the projects were not funded. They had, I think, an overwhelming response. We got some very good feedback in our debrief with BC Housing. And then really, we were looking to find other sources of funding. And in the fall, an opportunity came up to talk with the Lookout Society. And it was actually in response, I think, to the EOI for Lot 2 when we started talking with them. And as we worked through those things together, we discovered that, hey, their goals were very similar to ours on this Lot 3 project. And we said, hey, would you be interested in partnering with us for this one? Because we were really hitting some roadblocks, especially with the sort of financial position of the society being very small and grassroots. We didn't have the longevity and the background and sophistication to, or the history of taking on a project like this. We were really keen and felt that we could build the organization up. But Lookout, and I'll let Megan jump in when I'm ready here to explain, they have a fantastic track record. They've been around for 50 years. They've done projects like this. So it felt like a really natural fit. And they do have a presence on Bowen. So we entered into that MOU. It's actually recently been updated, which we're happy to share with council as part of this, which is the next step, the renewal of our agreement to lease. So Lookout will be our partner in this, and they will eventually, the plan is they will be the owners and operators of the building. So let me go ahead. So, maybe I'll throw it over to Megan now, and we'll just see how it goes with the ferries. Megan, do you want to jump in and introduce Lookout?
Yeah, sure. Good. So my name is Megan Krieger, and I'm the Director of Development for Lookout Housing and Health Society. And as Robin mentioned, we are an organization that's 52 years old now. We've been providing housing and support services to some of the most vulnerable community members in various communities. We started with just one shelter and 2 outreach nurses, and today we have 50 different sites. We're in 15 communities across the Lower Mainland and on the island, and we serve approximately 3,000 people every day. We're very strategic in trying to be a nimble organization that can be responsive to the various needs of the communities and making sure that we're meeting the gaps in services that might exist there, and particularly housing. We have over 50 different organizations, and because of the sustainability, we want to make sure that we're in folio in terms of our financing. We are an organization that employs just over 1,000 staff. That includes full-time, part-time, as well as casual staff. Works really well in that we can provide coverage for different communities. We can provide coverage when people are sick or want to go on vacation. And most recently during the pandemic, we were able to actually open sites where a lot of places were actually struggling with having enough staff to be able to operate sites. We do offer various types of housing, so everything from supportive housing to independent and mixed market housing. We've also done abstinence-based housing. And again, across the Lower Mainland, it's very different depending on what the community's needs, the demographic groups are that are in need of housing. We've done projects that were varying again from new builds to retrofits, and also just buying and using existing property to be able to provide safe homes for folks, which is why this particular project with Birch makes a lot of sense to us and is something that we are really excited to be a part of. We've been a part of the Bowen Island community just for a couple of years now, being able to offer some emergency shelter services there and a bit of outreach, and looking to be able to continue to expand our support island. As an organization, we strive to provide non-judgmental, inclusive, culturally safe, trauma-informed, and guest-centered services. And we do that with our housing. Housing isn't just about putting a roof over a head, but making sure that people are safe, that they're being empowered, that they've got access to resources, that there's case planning involved in helping people to move forward in whatever goals that they're looking to achieve. We're here to help support people to be successful in their lives, whatever that looks like for them. As an organization, we're a co-accredited organization, so we have always looking for establishing best practices and providing the highest quality of service delivery. We use tools like our performance and quality improvement and risk management reports to ensure that in fact stays that we're doing best practices, and that any concerns or questions from community or residents alike get addressed. They're all reported to the board of directors, and responses are collected every month and reported back to the board. That way they can make sure that we are in fact continuing to provide the highest quality service. As an organization, I think that we've been successful because we work closely with community partners like municipalities like yourselves. We work with other nonprofits like Birch. And then we also work with, again, a variety of different funders to make sure that we're not only, making sure that the project is well funded, but also that it's well supported and that any kind of supports that folks there who are living in the buildings may need are also being met. We also try to make sure that minority groups are being supported. So we work with Indigenous, immigrant, seniors, and various communities, again, to be able to bring in expertise that we may not have internally. One of the things I think that's probably most important for you all to hear tonight is that we've seen the communities and the residents where we've been able to come in and provide services and housing also really thrive. And again, that's because we work closely with municipalities. We work closely with the local stakeholders. We want to know what the community's needs are. We want to meet those gaps. And we want to make sure that we're involved in communities, but it's about becoming part of the community, giving back, taking part in social initiatives, and really engaging in the community. So that's a little bit about Lookout, and I'm happy to share our annual report with you all. I can send that over digitally so you can take a look at kind of some of the work that we've done over the past year.
That'd be great. Please do, Megan.
Yeah,
sure. Thank you so much, Megan. Well, let me get back into the presentation here. So next steps, just so it's clear, so Lookout will become the lead proponent for future funding applications. Birch will definitely still be staying involved through the development. Lookout's been very clear that they're really happy to have Birch on board as a community partner. We plan to continue engagement with the community. and certainly be that liaison with the municipality as well when needed. We're hoping, and this is a lot of unknowns at the moment, so our plans are that we'll be applying for the next round of funding from BC Housing's Community Housing Fund. We're hopeful that will be announced sometime by the end of this year, and that the intake will be sometime in early part of next year, but that's all very unknown at this stage. So we're waiting for that announcement, but we're poised and ready. We have some funding still available. So the plan is that we'll be updating our last application, working with Lookout, and getting an updated budget, of course. And yeah, that we'll be submitting to BC Housing. So that's our next steps. And of course, what I didn't include in here, which I think is on your agenda next, is that we'll be renewing the agreement to lease on the property on lot 3. So, and the ferry is just about to load. So I will pause there if anybody has any questions, and I can hang on the line and I'll be on the ferry in a moment.
All right, thank you very much, Robin. Megan, that's a very positive outlook for sure. Any questions? Maureen?
I'm not sure. Is Robin, are you still with us? She's driving. She's driving.
Yes, I am. I'm not quite loading yet. I can try to talk as I drive. Yes.
Okay, 2 questions. One is, are you anticipating any changes to the mix of housing that you have been thinking about all along?
That's a great question. The only change would likely be if there was a change in BC Housing's funding model. So the last application, we really tailored the mix of units and rent prices to suit BC Housing's needs, also to suit CMHC, the federal funding housing initiative, to suit their needs as well. Oops, sorry, that's my car beeping. Yeah, so to suit their needs, so we made sure that the units would meet both the needs of both of those funding things. So unless BC Housing changes their mix, we don't anticipate a large change.
Great, thank you. And then my second question is just in the current environment, has the Lookout Society been successful in securing funding for projects the type you're imagining on Bowen Island?
I'll put that one to Megan. Megan,
Yeah,
have you,
so
what's the experience been? Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, yeah, so we've actually found that the current climate has actually been quite beneficial for the types of services that we've been looking at, and the housing in particular for this location. We have had actually an increase in the number of funding opportunities that we could apply to, and so I don't think that will be a challenge. So yeah, I think that we've as an organization, we've seen approximately a 30% increase in our income in terms of funding almost annually for the last 4 to 5 years, even through the pandemic. And so I don't anticipate that would be a challenge now.
Thank you very much. That's good news.
Anybody else?
Yes, could I just ask, we talked about the nature of the units. Any proposed changes to the design concept?
No, for the overall building, and it's lovely, David's got it in his background there.
Yeah.
We don't anticipate much changes. There might be some minor alterations once we get going again for Lookout's need. They may have slightly bigger needs for maybe we have a small office. They might need slightly different spaces, but generally, no, we don't anticipate any big changes again, unless BC Housing drastically changes their needs, which I don't anticipate. Yeah.
Thank you, Robin.
All right. Anybody else? All right, we'll let you go. Are you on the ferry yet, Robin?
Well, if now I've got the ferry ride ahead of me, so I'll hang on in case there's any questions for the next agenda item, and then I'll drop off. But thank you, everybody.
Okay, thanks very much, Robin. Megan, thank you very much. David, nice to see you. Really appreciate this presentation.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
All right. So I'll move right into the business horizon for minutes. Bowen Island Resilient Community Housing Society Agreement to lease renewal. And over to you.
Hey, thank you, Mayor. So as you know, the Birch lease or sorry, agreement to lease has expired, or sorry, it expires in 4 days.
Yeah.
And so I would like to propose that we extend that agreement to lease, but the one change that I would recommend is the duration that the agreement to lease changes from a 3-year period to a 1-year period with the option to renew. But that all other elements of the lease remain the same. I do want to just double check it again because some of the language might need to change with this new partnership with Lookout. So I just want, I would circle back with Robin and just make sure that language was.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, any discussion?
Can you spell out,
Sorry.
can you spell out what the rationale is for shifting to 1 year?
It's really just in this current market, there may be other opportunities that present themselves. And so want to make sure that Birch and Outlook, the new partner, understand that there is a real desire from the municipality to put that land to its best possible use. And so, and it's not a disincentive at all. It's the current agreement has a statement in there about a need to show and demonstrate positive movement towards action. So this is really to try to encourage that. And it leaves the municipality with options to perhaps pursue alternatives if something is shifting or not working out the way it would.
I think given the length of time that these negotiations have gone on, albeit we now have new partners, the year plus the options would be a sound business way to proceed.
Yeah, that could be flexible depending on where you are in the situation. I'm gonna go to Sue Ellen.
Just wondering if Robin, or if what does Birch think about the change to 1 year? Is that, have you talked to them about it?
No, I've tried to set up meetings to do so, but we haven't successfully connected. So.
Is that it? Yeah. Okay, thanks, Phil. Allison?
I think because the reference here is for a 1 year extension of the agreement to lease, or are you actually going to change some of the other clauses?
Well, I think given the new partnership, it's worth a closer look to make sure that the new partnership either does or doesn't need to be referenced in the agreement to lease. And then we would look to change the term to 1 year with the option to extend.
So I think maybe we need to at least put the 1 year in the prepare a renewal of the agreement to lease for lot 3 for a 1 year period with an option to extend.
Right.
And I think we need to put those words in there so it's clear to everybody looking back that it was canceled for 1 year.
Did you pick that up, Sophie? Okay.
I'll move the amended recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Is everybody happy with the way what's going on here? Okay, thank you. And Michael's just
That's the third morning.
Yeah.
Just a second.
Oh, okay. Great. Super. Energy here. Okay, so that's good. Further discussion on that? Okay, I'll ask a question. All in favor? Aye. Great, that's unanimous. Okay, that's super. Thank you very much again. Okay, let's move on to 6.2, which is a deferred motion for the June 22nd, 2022 regular council meeting. Read the House Act before memorandum of understanding. Councilor Morris.
Okay, in the agenda package was a track changes version with comment that I had a long telephone conversation with Bruce Simons on Thursday and got a few more bits of clarification. So there's a couple more little bits of tidying up I did. And then I sent around a clean copy so it would be easier for everybody to understand. And Ruth was quite happy with us putting in the vision statement rather than the mission statement. And when I did do the clean up, to do the clean copy today, I picked up the, which if you don't have your glasses on, you don't see the typo in biosphere in the last line of the first paragraph under section 2. And it's a small change to the description of, because Brackenville is actually part of Squamish. So where it says Squamish, little letters, got bracket, Squamish, area D, it was confirmed that Furry Creek and Britannia are area D. So that was a small change there. And then the only clause, and then I numbered number 6, numbers 1 to 7, to match the numbering in the appendix so that things related. And I changed the reference to Bowen Island Municipality in a couple of cases, and then just referring to it as Bowen. Because there's confusion. I don't think Ruth realized that Hutt was part of the municipality, Hutt Island. So that just, and the size of the island is questionable. It's, when you look at our letters patent, it's 50.5 square kilometers. When you look at the island profile, it's 49.64. When you look at BOMAP, it's over 50, and there was one other, and you look at Census Canada Census, it's over 50. So that's why I've said approximately 50 square kilometers. And that was sort of the other change. And then the only other issue that I had was with number 7. And that was where it says offer and facilitate funding resources for Howe Sound Biosphere Reserve for educational opportunities.
Section 6, number 7.
Yeah, section 6, number 7. Were we committing to something? And Lisa and I talked about it, and she understands that we would have to consider and budget. So Kristen and I have talked about that, and I guess as Kristen pointed out, it says offer and facilitate. We don't have to give them, I mean, if it is sort of committing us to give something, but it doesn't quantify the something. So
It's not an open-ended thing.
yeah, we could just give them $50.
Yeah.
Or we can put in words to consider offering and facilitating. Or put in words along the lines of what I suggested, in our annual budget process, consider. So I guess the question is, which is everybody more comfortable with?
We've made similar proposals. For consistency, don't we normally refer consistent to the annual budget? It seems.
Well, that was the suggestion that I made. If you read the little number 3 fine print in the track changes. So I guess.
Would be personally, my preference is a form of wording.
Yeah. So consider in the annual budget process. Facilitating funding resources for Howe Sound Free, is that what would, is anybody, I mean, as Kristen said, and I talked to Lions Bay, they signed it as is, and I gathered from Councilor Best that the Allen's Trust, Gambier signed it as is. So we're not committing to a specific amount, so we are committing to give them something, so it could be $100. Yeah.
Simone, comment on that?
Just the letter from Gambier Local Trust Committees under my signature here, that basically the adjustments that we made related to the ones that you're talking about say things like we acknowledge and support the changes to the principle of cooperation based on a reasonable assessment of convening costs for any specific meeting for which the host.
Yeah. So we've already dealt with that one.
Yeah, you've got it in there. And then the other one was we expect that future Gambier Island local trust committees will continue to in the ongoing participation, because you can't find future.
But you didn't change the wording in section 7.
I'm fine.
Did you or didn't you?
No, we didn't change any wording in the we just had a cover letter.
So are we happy to leave it the way it is, or do you want that in there?
Well, my accounting and financial background tells me we should say consider facilitating funding resources in our annual budget process. But
We might consider it at times other than our annual budget process. We are going to be considering in-kind support during an annual budget process. And similarly, you might provide a grant at a time outside of the annual budget process. I think it's restricting it just a little bit too much.
okay, so then the other option is to enclose a cover letter to say, section 6 of 7 is subject to,
Based on a reasonable assessment of convening costs.
well, budget, no, that's the cost for the house on the floor. The cost of, staffing availability and annual budget consideration.
I like leaving it clean, like are we supporting it or not? It all sounds like we're sort of,
We're supporting it, but we can't support it open-endedly. That's the
Yeah, my concern was with how open-ended is it, like, I said to Ruth, you're gonna come back and say, you said you'd fund us. And Krista's answer to that one was, yes, we will, here's $100. So so somehow I guess we just want to make it clear that it's subject to budget availability and our other staffing resources, et cetera. So cover that off in the cover letter or put it in the MOU. David's revenue stream.
we have Hassan with us there and
Yeah.
Hassan is part of the board of the House Sound Free.
Yeah,
And maybe we can ask him, he's pointing at something down there.
that's a good idea.
But it's just if you do look at the appendix where the opportunities may be in the form, including that it could be as simple as waiving costs of meetings. We talked about the in-kind, and again, as I talked about last month, these came from suggestions from the councillors from around the different municipalities in House Sound. We didn't make these up, we actually did it in consultation with you guys.
Right.
Yes. But again,
if you read it, these opportunities could include, so there's obviously not, we're not interpreting that we're coming back with $20,000 from you. It really is up to what you guys feel, how you can support us and what our needs are and what your needs are. Right.
well, I guess it's what our ability to pay is too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's pretty clear here that it's as simple as that.
Well, except you are asking for a grant and aid and you haven't.
Which you're trying to include.
Yeah, but a grant and aid of $100 or a grant and aid of $10,000, what,
It also says support the long-term sustainability through opportunities to facilitate Secretary of Services or in-kind support. So and then it says these opportunities could include the ones that Hassan just read. So which includes in-kind time of staff resources, waiving the costs of meeting rooms.
Well, the only one that probably wouldn't cost us anything is waiving the cost of meeting rooms. I mean, staff resources means they're taken away from something else. We've got a grants and aid policy, so contribution to Secretary of Services, that's money, we're providing staff time, so, yeah. I mean, my druthers would be to have it say, subject to budget and staff budget constraints.
Some kind of an out is what you're saying. Can we send that in a letter afterwards? Cover letter? I just want to get this.
Yeah, I mean, well, Kristen wasn't, she said, yeah, we can say, here's your grant aid of $100.
Yeah.
We don't.
She wasn't bothered.
No.
Well, she was concerned. Right. She said, we're not committing to an absolute amount.
Right.
For a specific thing.
Sure, okay, but by signing the memorandum of understanding, we're committed to support principles of and planning
and then the appendix is an integral part of the agreement.
Yeah.
And other than sort of tidying up some formatting, fixing some names, I removed the reference under section 4, which was a complete copy of what was in section 6. Ruth got that when I explained that to her. And then, yeah. So that was Lori.
I think you did a really good job. And we'd simply move.
I'll second that.
Oh, and by the way, Ruth, if I'm understanding it, she is president and she's acting executive director. So that's the explanation of the two different budgets. Now you're comfortable with them? Okay.
Yep.
And you know that we're not writing blank checks.
That's right. Yeah, no,
Me to answer.
As amended.
no blank checks.
Yeah, but we didn't amend it. It's as presented. We haven't made any changes.
Okay.
This clean copy that I've got on here. So what was your resolution? So we have lost that.
The council continue to support the Housedown Biosphere Region Initiative Society and its objectives by entering into a memorandum of understanding agreement as presented in the clean copy provided by Councillor.
Well, just say as presented on table at the
July 25th council event.
Perfect. We have a first and second on that, is understood.
Yeah.
Further discussion? And last question, all in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to 6.3, which is.
Oh, hang on, I want one more thing. Looking, the news release that's up there is under additional information, which is the creation of the management plan and the discussion paper, which was never ever formally sent to us as council, which I think after chatting with Ruth, she realized that maybe that would have been a wise thing to do. I checked with her. When you read the discussion paper, you'll see that the time for comment has already ended. However, that is not true. They're way behind in their schedule. So I was thinking we might want to refer this to the Climate Action Committee, ECAC, to see if they have any comments on the discussion paper.
I think we could.
I'd like to just move forward.
Yeah.
Well, they're
It's moving
asking for
forward.
input from people on on values and things in the, and there's a whole questionnaire that they've developed, which somehow I don't think got in here. But there's a link to it in the discussion paper.
Can I just say, as a member of the Ocean Watch Working Group, and we're already involved in lots of these things, and the Islands Trust provides some secretariat support as well. And there's lots going on already. I think I was part of a workshop. I thought maybe you were there too a couple of years ago. We did discuss the updating the principles of
That was the Prince, the House Sound Forum.
That's right.
Principles,
And,
we agreed to at the last meeting.
yeah, and I just I think we should let the biosphere do their work, and if people want to send in their comments individually, they could, but
So then I will just draw attention to the agenda, the information, the discussion paper, and they are seeking public input. And so if people want to reply to that. And then the last thing that they asked us for in the memorandum, we're committing to assigning a staff person. And my understanding is from talking with Ruth that she has asked our CAO and he has appointed Bonnie.
Yes.
Okay, so Bonnie is our staff liaison. And Ruth is very much relying on that person to transfer knowledge and keep us updated on what's going on. So I think it might be, there's a bit of a job description of that staff person in the, in this thing somewhere.
Yep.
So I think maybe it might become a bit of a sort of an agenda item of reporting out on what's going on with
Biosphere.
the biosphere.
Yeah, so we gotta wrap this.
Yeah.
sure. I just want to
That's
say,
the end of my information items.
okay, I just want to say Bonnie Brokenshire is all involved in the Ocean Watch
Yes,
task force, as you know, because we appointed her council several years ago, and I'm sure she'd be happy to present, but she's all over this stuff and is well involved. Just great.
super duper. Okay, we're gonna move on to 6.3, which is conservation development policy. Daniel Martin, Manager of Planning and Development. Go ahead, Daniel. Thank you.
Okay, Andrew, let me just start my. So, yeah, talking about the conservation development policy. So as I presented before, this builds on existing OC objectives and policies. But I won't dwell too much on that. They're just highlighting objective 50. So the goal of the policy is to build on its objective, to create areas where land is set aside as green space and perpetuity and to discourage commercial residential strip or urban development. And then objective 55 to encourage residential cluster development rather than And again, in some of our policies, so outside of the residential cluster development is preferred. And the municipality encourages cluster forms of development, leaving a smaller impact on the landscape. So council saw the draft conservation development policy at the May 24th meeting, and that referred the policy to the advisory planning commission and the action advisory committee. So ECAC discussed it on June 7th and had some discussion points, and then adopted the motion that they recommend that more specific suggestions be included regarding potential land donations, areas that could form an ecological corridor, and those that may act as trail linkages. And the APC met actually the previous night, June 6th, to discuss it. So some of the discussion included just some of the notes here, our discussion we had on what it would look like in terms of the rezoning. Clarification of the policy is seeking to interpret and provide clarity on existing OCP clauses, so policies and objectives, and that intentionally at a high level to allow council and staff interpretive leeway when considering applications. And then clarifying the OCP releases and amenity contributions. And some of these are already identified. So the OCP identifies environmentally sensitive areas, the parks plan identifies desired areas for public use. So these would be of use informing green space requests in rezoning application. The APC supported the policy as presented and provided comments that the policy notified minor changes of use, and that the 50% green space provision be stipulated as aspirational, not a requirement, and may be possibly replaced with amenity contributions which further other priorities. And that identification and mapping of priority green space areas on Bowen would be considered in the future. So based on that feedback, staff have made some amendments to the policy. So amending the policy objective to make the policy apply to rezonings which increase density. So adding that clarification so it would not affect minor rezonings that don't affect the density of the property. Changing the heading of the start of the guidelines, and I'll go through these, I'll show you the changes to better reflect the city goals of the policy, and adding to the conservation development definition to include ecological corridors as an item that conservation development seeks to protect.
Define ecological corridor, please.
So the policy doesn't define it, but I would define it as a corridor protected. So the policy objective, so to ensure all rezoning applications which increase density outside of Sunco Village incorporate conservation development principles. So no changes to the overall purpose. So it's to evaluate applications for land use bylaw amendments to implement policies from the OCP, promote cluster development, protection of environment sensitive areas, and development consistent with the principles of conservation development. So it serves as a guide for applicants and staff to determine how council will evaluate applications for land use bylaw amendments. And so then the guidelines would be to provide for the protection of environmentally sensitive areas and green space, so trying to put them in the same order as they are in the definitions. In line with the proposed development, all rezoning applications outside of Sunco Village boundary, in addition to other municipal policies and bylaws, will be evaluated on the basis of, and then no changes to the rest of analysis of existing natural features, incorporation of conservation development principles with a goal that a minimum of 50% of the total land area subject to rezoning applications protected from further development, and by the means by which the protections will be provided. And I wanted to pause here just in terms of the public comment you received, the letter and then the presentation for the public comment. And just I think in terms of that developer's potential application, so one aspect of it is located immediately adjacent to the Sunco Village boundary. And so any rezoning and OCP amendment would involve a change to the Sunco Village boundary to permit multi-family forms of housing in that area. And so then for that area within the Parkview slopes, the policy would not be applying if it's within the Sunco Village boundary.
Could you repeat that?
Yeah. So the policy as it is for rezoning applications that are outside of the Sunco Village boundary, which is defined in our OCP. There's a map of an area. So the public comment provided, one of their potential development sites lies on a space that's partly within and partly without the Sunco Village boundary. But to permit, sort of residential development higher than is currently zoned, and especially in particular multifamily forms of housing, it would be an OCP amendment, which we've discussed, and the OCP amendment would involve amending the Sunco Village boundary so that that area is within the boundary to support the multifamily forms of housing. And at that point, the conservation development policy would not apply to the Parkview Slope site.
And what proportion of the Parkview Slope site then would be affected in this way and excluded from the conservation development?
And I mean, I would assume all of it, that is part of the application. It's like the amendment would be to amend Sunco Village and say this is part of, you know, this housing form was built form. This is really part of the Sunco Village boundary, and that would be part of the application amendment to the OCP to say to recognize that development as part of the Sunco Village. And in a sense, because that's the best way, essentially, to get the vision of the OCP and say multifamily housing forms are permitted in the Sunco Village area. It's sort of the logical amendment to be seeking public comment on. This is part of expanding the Sunco area to include Parkview Slopes.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
And the other development area of interest too.
Yeah, and I guess on that, oh, sorry, going forward, I guess because I have spoken with multiple potential applicants on this policy, and I think in terms of the Cowan Point area. So when I think I was working on the assumption that sort of existing that green space protected would be considered by council as part of it. So in terms of an overall master plan where significant green space has been provided, that council doesn't then come back and say, okay, well, they gave everything, and now the stuff that we want half of again.
That's how this reads.
So, well,
And so I guess sorry, the other piece then too is, and I've talked about this with multiple potential applicants in terms of, and this could be reworded to be more clear, but in the start of the guidelines where it says, in addition to other municipal policies and bylaws, you're evaluated on the basis of these points.
Yeah.
So talking to people who are considering applications that are things like diverse forms of housing, even though it may not be affordable housing as defined by our policy, but they're talking about, well, we're trying to provide different forms of housing. It's hard to do that and do 50%. And I say, well, that's part of how I read this policy. Is it saying it is a trade-off for council in that sense? That
There's a lot of flexibility in it, is what you're saying.
that you're saying, okay, they're providing a diverse housing that we need to be, but so maybe the guidelines could be amended to better show that there is, council appreciates that there is a trade-off in play.
and we have had many discussions with the public speaker, and it was never really raised because it was never intended to apply to.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly hope that they're watching the video or the Zoom.
Yeah, I hope so too. Allison.
Well, the words, to me, when I read in addition to other municipal policies, I was reading that in, other policies and plans we've got, not as other possible amenity contributions instead of 50%. So, and I think, like in your guidelines, your wording needs to say, to manage proposed development, all rezoning applications which increase density. I mean, I think that wording needs to
Match the wording
up above. And then I've got a hang up with, you talk about conservation development principles and conservation development principles are performed. There's really no provision to provide. It's a goal at a minimum of 50% is protected from further development prior, and then the means of protection will be, and even in your definition of conservation development, you're saying you're going to protect farmland and scenic landscapes and historic and cultural resources in the definition. Yet, if somebody's going to protect historic and cultural resources, but they're not things that are environmentally sensitive, but they could make up 25 to 50% of the land. So there, I like the idea of the APCs to add a little bit of, flexibility, that it's not environmentally sensitive areas all or nothing. So that was the other, and then conservation development. think maybe you gotta talk about the conservation development values, and then you can say, and other values behind other green space. You've said in definition of conservation development, you're talking about ecologically sensitive areas, not environmentally sensitive areas. So that's a typo that I think needs to be fixed. And then you've given 3 definitions that are direct quotes out of the OCP, and conservation development is a new definition. So I don't know why we're quoting 3 things out of the OCP and putting in a. And so is the OCP going to be amended to add the definition of conservation development? I'd like to hear from the staff person today, an answer to that. And then yes. Yeah, so we're wanting to protect farmland and heritage and culture. So, and then I don't know why you're talking about total land subject to rezoning, and there's lakes and streams and water areas as well. So maybe it's just total area.
And there's some traffic.
If I may quickly on that, yeah, there's a lot of it. That the term conservation development is defined by the policy itself, which is effectively this concept of nature needs habitat.
Okay, so then I think we need to make it clear that cluster development, environmentally sensitive areas and green space are as defined for the OCP. They're not new definitions that we're putting in. So, yeah. And I still don't understand what ecological corridors are.
It's a corridor that allows connectivity of critical habitat, or whether it's marine life or terrestrial life. Or, it can be beneficial to those animals to survive. It can be beneficial to
So what's the
climate
difference
change,
between an
mitigation,
ecological corridor and a wildlife?
same thing, different terminology.
And everybody's used to wildlife corridors because I think we use
Depends on the
that.
circles you're at.
Yeah, I'm thinking about our other topic.
Okay, I know the date, we gotta wrap this up.
Yeah, so I'm the lead staff, the council rep on the APC. And so I was part of that discussion. Well, I listened to that discussion. I actually contributed a bit. And I would, Daniel and Garrett both talked about flexibility, and I certainly, the idea of the conservation development, cluster development is to move away from sort of a sprawl approach. But certainly in certain circumstances, other amenities would be more feasible. And so I like that flexibility to be reflected in the policy. It sort of suggests, it says a minimum 50%. We don't need all the words from the APC, but may possibly be replaced with amenity contributions, which further other municipal priorities. I think it's pretty strong. So I'd like to have that put in there. Good. So in other words, just to provide some flexibility, we're giving developers or people who are doing a rezoning an idea of what we're looking for. We all have spoken often that affordable housing and varied housing is the most important issue that we're facing right now. And so certainly if somebody can really offer something on that and we lose a little bit of land, that 50%, that would be fine with me.
Daniel, can you work that in without changing the?
Is it time sensitive? Can we ask staff to take this?
I don't think this seems
next meeting. Okay.
Beating this up forever.
So I guess one is, I think it's just to protect, as part of the APC discussion about flexibility. And in my mind, it's like, okay, well, it says, with a goal that a minimum, right? And so I know as soon as it starts saying language like, an aspirational goal, right? As soon as you start to do that, people are like, it's not really 50, it's not really half figure, it's really something less.
I had a discussion, I didn't like the word aspirational for that reason. It suggests you don't really mean it.
And then, and I guess more I probably look towards maybe language in the guidelines, because I know part of the challenge I think with a policy is like if it's the conservation development policy, and it's instead of conservation development policy, you could do housing, or you could do other goal. It starts to be hard to be, well, this is the conservation development policy goal, knowing that but so maybe the language in the guideline be better about the trade-offs, because knowing that what council does have to do trade-offs, and even now in rezonings, we'll have different OCP objectives, and council's doing a trade-off in terms of are we, how much are we meeting this objective versus this objective? There's a trade-off involved, so maybe that language can be better, but I was having trouble, I think, with the policy's conservation development, and it says, or we can do a housing, it's like, well, we have a housing policy, right? But I'm open to language, yeah.
That sounds good too.
And in the guidelines section, you've got those 3 bullet points. Could you add a 4th bullet point that identifies the amenity that could be provided? That's not useful language at all, but just adding in there a 4th bullet point that addresses the point that the ACP was making the second.
So you look at the policy objective, the very first 2 lines. It says achieve a goal of nature needs half. That's pretty definitive of saying half for nature.
Still the goal.
That's the goal. That's the goal.
Still the goal.
Doesn't mean you always reach. Oh,
No, but it doesn't mean that you would take something instead.
well, possibly you can.
But that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You include as a 4th bullet point that you will take something instead in some circumstances.
Well, then you could use the wording and achieve the conservation development values.
Something along the lines of
So-
council reserves the right to consider alternatives.
Yeah,
The language that came from the ACP was the aspirational piece and may possibly be replaced with amenity contributions, which further for other municipal priorities. I don't think specifying housing isn't necessarily the way to go, but other municipal priorities, if you use that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually the part that I read out of the APC one that I think works.
Yeah.
Could possibly replace that.
Amenity contributions, which further other municipal priorities.
that decision would be made by council.
So would that work, Daniel? And but do we need to have you do something and come back, or is this good enough guidance?
Well, I mean, one thing our speaker brought to the team was how easy it is. I mean, there it was, action, and then we looked up on here and we were aspirational, and I thought, okay, goodness me, this is really going to clarify. The devil is in the details, obviously, and the wording here is very important to make sure this is clearly understood. Now, we've had a lot of really great ideas in the last 15, 20 minutes. Now, is it possible and fair to ask Daniel to incorporate all those ideas we've just raised, and some of them are really quite detailed and need to be really thought through this evening so we can pass it? I'm sure I would like to move this on as much as anyone. I'm not sure that that is a reasonable request to ask Daniel to be able to wordsmith all these changes without giving it necessary thought, but it does need careful consideration, and I for one wouldn't mind reading over the final copy when we've had all the input received. So, and Daniel, I'm not trying to hold things back, but really, realistically, can you incorporate all these ideas?
I would say
I have the flexibility in words.
Yeah, I would say I have no issue with deferring to the September meeting, and council provide feedback now and then can circulate a draft and bring it. And if everyone, if it's straightforward, it can just go and at that point. But rather than I know council's had a long day, rather than wordsmithing during the meeting, I'm happy to take any feedback and defer.
It's on the 26th, it's gonna be busy.
Yeah, but it could just be.
Get it in consistent.
I like that idea. I would sooner move it ahead tonight because this is a policy, not a bylaw. So it doesn't have as strong teeth it's just an invitation to people to bring these kinds of ideas forward to the planning department. This is the policy, but not a bylaw. So I would sooner move it ahead. I heard the feedback also from the other committee, the ECAC committee, and I don't want to delay it so that it gets dropped by the end of council, and that's what I'm worried about. But hearing Daniel say that now, I have my hand up already. I can wait till September 27th, but I also don't want to make too many changes. It's, I like the idea of putting that bullet that he started there, the fourth bullet. And I don't think we need to make any more changes than that.
I'm the same opinion. We've said a lot of things, and Allison, it sounds as though has some small changes that need to be made with a properly crafted report and some of the editorials. That's all I'm imagining would be altered in this.
Well, then I would like to, let's just work on that bullet, if that's all.
Well, I don't think we're prepared to do that right now.
I'd like to move. That council adopt, oh no, I can't move it yet. Let's,
Are we gonna do this by committee, sitting around the table, making all the changes, because we'll be here for half an hour?
well, we've got a line.
I don't want to vote on this when I think I probably would vote against it at this point.
Right.
Because I'm.
So let's leave it. Let's let Daniel come back in September with a nice polished up version, and we can just fire that right through the mouth again.
Okay, but I appreciate all the work and the input that's gone into it so far.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of referring to the OCP for some of the definitions, that's fine. And I just don't want to make too many big changes at this point, otherwise.
I think there's clarification, not changes.
I think in terms of what I've heard from council, there's some clarification that Allison has raised, and then it's this wordsmithing this fourth point in terms of making clear the balancing council will be doing in terms of this contribution versus other. So I think those would be that's what I've heard, and those would be the changes.
Okay.
Consent. And we did say that
Probably the way it would have worked out anyway, but
if we have 2 or 3 examples like this, we may have to convene a short meeting.
I'd have to.
An extra meeting.
So do we get a motion or do we?
I move that we
We're just,
Request staff to
okay, close that.
return to. That's what based on the input received.
Second over David, all in favor? Thank you. Bylaw 7.1, Bowen Island Municipality Land Use Bylaw number 37/2022 amendment bylaw number 581/2022 Detached Secondary Suite Regulation. Daniel Marlowe. Daniel, there you go.
All right, so bylaw 581, detached secondary suite regulations. Bylaw 581 makes 3 changes to the land use bylaw. So it removes the requirement for a minimum lot size for a detached secondary suite. It increases the floor area to a maximum of 140 square meters, but based on a percentage of the lot area. And it amends the development permit guidelines to include consideration of the siting of the detached secondary suite. So this bylaw came from council direction in October. There's been a variety of council staff reports on it as we've gone through, and most recently went to a public hearing July 18th. Yeah, we had 6 speakers at the hearing and 27 letters were received and are included in the agenda for that hearing and the minutes of the public hearing in this agenda as well. So all of the speakers spoke to oppose the bylaw. And of the letters received, 3 were marked as supportive of the proposed bylaw, and the remaining 24 were in opposition. So I always have trouble sort of emphasizing concerns raised and feel like I'm, to do it justice. But in terms of, if I was going to do it in a sentence, concerns raised include the scope of the proposed change, concerns about water and septic capacity of the island, and concerns about if the bylaw complies with the official community plan. So I wanted to address those points just in brief during the report for this presentation. So in terms of the official community plan, the general land use management principle 3, the principle is that the overall number of primary dwelling units in the anticipated 1996 OCP will remain the same, but the footnote says the total number of units may vary to reflect the creation of secondary suites and detached secondary suites allowed in all residential areas. And a similar vein, the policy 129 again reiterates that there's no overall increase in the total number of primary dwelling units that was anticipated in the 1996 OCP. And again, this policy comes with the footnote that the total number of units may vary to reflect the creation of secondary suites and detached secondary suites allowed in all residential areas. And then policy 355, which focuses on housing, talks about housing types that are permitted within the Stunco Village and outside of Stunco. Within Stunco Village, it says following types of housing are supported: detached homes and detached homes with a secondary suite or a detached secondary suite. So based on these OCP policies, staff see that the OCP supports the creation of detached secondary suites, supports the creation of detached secondary suites outside of Stunco and then in all residential areas. And then some discussion about the total number of secondary suites. The land use bylaw currently permits properties to have one what's called accessory residential use, which is a secondary suite, either attached or detached. So the land use bylaw permits either an attached or a detached, and then currently the land use bylaw regulations limits detached secondary suites to properties above a certain size. Bylaw 581 doesn't change this, so properties would continue to be permitted one accessory residential use, either attached or detached. What it would permit is additional housing choice. So some people who previously would only have an attached secondary suite would be permitted a detached secondary suite. And then the staff report goes into as well some of the other regulations in the land use bylaw that are unchanged by this bylaw. So such as the total lot coverage permitted on a site, the total number of accessory buildings permitted, the total floor area in accessory buildings that are permitted, and sometimes the total floor area on the property that are permitted. So somebody wishing to develop a secondary suite or a detached secondary suite has to fit within those other regulations that are in the land use bylaw and aren't changed by this bylaw. So, you know, currently, and we would continue to have people who want to develop suites sometimes have to face the choice of removing an existing building, removing existing lot coverage, removing existing floor area in order to develop. And then just wanted to list this. Council is probably aware of it. So after a public hearing, council may, without further notice or hearing, adopt or defeat the bylaw or provide that the alteration doesn't, or may alter and then adopt the bylaw, provided the alteration does not alter the use, increase the density, or which doesn't really apply here without the owner's consent, decrease the density. So just in thinking about potential amendments to the bylaw. And then in the report, I just list some, you know, potential amendments if council is considering it and trying to give some thought about, are these amendments that would alter the use or the density and would require further public hearing. So with that said, the staff recommendation is that the bylaw 581 be read a third time and be reconsidered and adopted.
All right, thank you, Daniel. David?
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Gary. Daniel, I thought your report did a great job. You know, reading it through, we had a whole lot of opposition to this, but it was really based on misunderstanding of what was going on. If you know, talk about with one stroke of the pen, we're doubling the population of Bowen. Well, that stroke of the pen happened about 15 years ago. And so really this is a very small change. I think you know, there were a lot of issues raised, but they were misunderstandings of what's going on here, what's being done. And so I support it. The only thing, the issue around sewage and water, of course, building permit requires all that. So it's really, you handled everything very well, I thought. The only thing that I'm worried about is the short-term rentals. I realized from your note that if we're to change that, it means we have to go back to another public hearing. I'm really concerned about STR, but I recognize that we're pushing that off. Of course, it does mean, well, we've still got that 120-day limit. And we're putting this off to the next council because it's a tricky issue. It really has to be handled carefully and thought through. The whole thing has to be thought through. So I'm okay with moving it forward as is, with the recognition that I'm still worried about short-term rentals. But let's look at it holistically a little bit later. That's it for me.
But a review clause in there like we did in the original. After 2 years, you take a look at it and see just if it is under control. Maybe do. Rob?
Yeah, so I'm unsure about this one. I'm actually leaning towards not supporting it, but for a couple of reasons. And if you give any comments on any of these, often something I'd like to know. But, you know, one of the areas I'm really worried about is the sprawl happening, and this now going into properties that first, that it potentially are gonna have more housing on them, us being able to service that sprawl, especially if it's outside of the code. And also around just making sure that we do keep, you know, forested land, like the policy we were just talking about with conservation development. So that's a bit of that's an issue for me that has me sort of not wanting to support this. The other one also is, well, the public support which you've brought up is not really there. At least from what we've heard, it was pretty much universally against this policy. So that definitely concerns me. And also the potential for this actually in a way upping land values. And then the worst case scenario would be is the land values would get upped. And especially with the high cost of building housing, is it realistic that it would be cheap rental, or are we just potentially getting higher land values plus STRs moving into those areas? So those are sort of four of my main areas of concern moving forward. And I do see this as being fairly significant, and I'm also questioning whether this is an OCP discussion review, if that's not more appropriate that first go through that instead of us making this decision without that big overall picture.
I think, Rob, like I would point to the existing OCP policies that do say detached secondary suites allowed in all residential areas, specifically said that those are types of housing that we're seeking outside of Stone Cove Village. So in terms of that, it's like the OCP specifically says these are types of housing that take place outside of Stone Cove Village, so that the type of development that we want to see throughout the island. In terms of sort of large scale change, I do think, and my report tried to go through the history of like suites on Bowen, the change that 2006 bylaw that was adopted in 2008, that was really the significant change to permit a secondary suite on every property. And since then, like the 2016 bylaw permitted detached secondary suites on some larger properties. This would now permit it on all properties, but in place of that attached suite. So I do think that was the bigger change, and this is now sort of more minor changes to the form that the housing takes place.
How many suites have been actually built that we know about?
Total suites.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I provided
Detached.
this to council to start our numbers since 2016, I think, which was like, and I don't remember off the top of my head. So I'm sorry.
So it's not that
Not very
all of
many.
a sudden everybody's built.
And I think, sorry, Rob, just the last point I've had is that what I've noticed since that 2016 adoption is how is it like properties do get marketed right now if they're larger than 0.36 hectares or not. So it did create essentially a dividing point in terms of bigger properties were advertised as like you could build a detached secondary suite on this, and smaller ones, and you get called if a property was 0.35 hectares, and was it close enough? It's not. I'm sure that would impact. There's sort of a dividing line in terms of real estate value, and now maybe it would be more evaluated on like, well, is there a feasible location for a detached secondary suite, and that would be a cause a divergence in real estate values, but. Yeah.
I think I want to echo what Daniel was saying. Like the proposal here is consistent with the existing OCP, and it's not a far departure from the existing land use bylaw. So it's it's not like we're going to see every property that has the ability now to put a lot or a detached secondary suite, turn around and build one right away. It would take many, many years for that to occur. And a lot of the applications will likely get rejected because it won't fit within some of the other constraints around water, wastewater, setbacks, or lot coverage or things like that. So it's not that every lot on Bowen will be able to, and it's most certainly every lot on Bowen will not all of a sudden turn around and do this. It'll take decades for it to come to full build up, even if it ever does, which I doubt it would.
I think, sorry, Rob, just to one other point you made in terms of it. I don't think that this bylaw by itself would help, would solve essentially providing rental housing on Bowen. Like primarily what we see them built for is essentially for like, family housing. So it's housing for kids or housing for parents. And that's the prime driver of building them. And that given housing construction prices in Bowen, it's basically not economical unless, certain circumstance, but in large part, it's not economical to build it to rent out. Like the rent that you would receive for it doesn't match the building costs. So we see them built more as sort of that like intergenerational family housing. But that's not to say that, upon a resale, now it's a rental opportunity, or as life circumstance change, but that's more the applications we see are more that type of application.
Okay, Siobhan, and then
Could I just add some numbers? Over the 6-year period, these are from Daniel, we had 32 attached secondary suites built.
that's in the house.
And 14 detached secondary suites. So that's over the period 2016 to 2021.
These aren't huge over
5 years, basically, 5 years, and that's.
Not gigantic.
And I think if this bylaw passes, the ratio may change a bit in terms of 2-to-1 attached to detached, but probably it stays similar to that because it is, it's significantly cheaper to build an attached suite in terms of you're building the same footprint and you will and it fits within it. It's much cheaper than building detached.
Okay, Siobhan.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm so far still going to be voting against this as I have all the way long. And I mean, I have been doing my homework. I agree that we need more housing, diversity and that kind of thing. And it is consistent. Thank you for the clarification in this report. It's really helpful to see all of the references to the official community plan that many of the speakers were heard in the public hearing were concerned about. But there are other parts of the official community plan, goals and objectives about healthy ecosystems. And I would like to be seeing some of those reflected before I could support it. I see that staff acknowledge that it will create or could create more impervious surfaces at a time when we've got more storms and extreme runoff and drinking water concerns about permeability and more development in general taking the place of perhaps taking the place of trees and things. I would just love to do the other half of it. You mentioned the word holistic. Where's the protecting and strengthening the ecosystems around this increased development so that as a whole, the fabric can sustain the community into the future. I was looking at Snug Cove when we've been dealing with some of the development variance permits, seeing the shots from the air and looking back when I was looking at air and nesting things going, wow, there's a lot of trees that are gone. It's changing the rural character of our rural character of our island is changing in the smaller lot areas of our development. And I think we could be losing it. This is the part of the rural sprawl that I am concerned about is where is the connectivity planning? Where is the strengthening and protecting the ecosystems and the processes, like the making sure the pollinators can get to everybody's vegetable gardens and making sure that there's shade to keep the ground moisture so that fires are less likely to start in your houses or near in places that could threaten people that climate impacts are building. Where is the ecosystem protection to balance this increased development? And the final thing I'll just mention is that the speed of these developments is not a concern to me because we're looking out 100 years. All of this could happen. You mentioned at build out, and I just don't see the careful planning for density done well in here. It's where we don't have the environmental protection in place, the ecosystem protective policies, except for setbacks and lot coverage and things like that, that doesn't relate to the functioning of the ecosystems. So that's my point so far. I'm still not convinced that it's good for the island, especially in these smaller lots, and so I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue Ellen. Okay, we're gonna wrap this up, Allison. And
I just wanted to echo Councillor Hawkins' comments. It's an excellent report, and you did a really good job of commenting on all the issues that were raised. Yes, the comments we got were negative, but it's a sort of a fact, and I can point to several rezoning applications over the years. The people that are in support don't usually come out. They're usually quiet. And I don't think it's sprawl at all. Those lots are already there. They've already got houses on them. So all you're doing is, you know, you're only adding one. You've already got the driveway. If you had a new lot, you'd have to build a whole new driveway. So I think there's less environmental impact with having a detached secondary suite than there is with not doing it. And it does provide, I think, some needed housing. And people with kids, I think, would prefer a detached secondary suite instead of an inside secondary suite. And I think the people renting to them would too. And I can't read my own notes as well. So I'm very much in support of this whole thing.
Okay, Michael.
I can see the difficulties that, but this is a very serious consideration, actually. But I do agree with David, and I do agree with the points that Alison. I wish during the public hearing we had heard from some other people, some people maybe who are renting at the moment, some people who were looking to expand. Unfortunately, we didn't hear from them. And I'm far from convinced that what we did hear was entirely representative of the island as a whole, considering our housing needs. So it's a balance, and the points Councillor Fox has made are, you know, not to be underrated. So one trusts that the safeguards put in to allow these to happen, for setbacks and for form and for everything else, will provide the sort of buildings that we so urgently need. And right now, I don't think we can afford to turn our back on them. So I recognize its complications. Short-term vacation rentals don't go away. I completely agree with that. We're going to have to look at that. But yes, I suppose
That's a separate issue.
Well, I think we've already passed a resolution to have that reviewed in so.
Yes.
So I would move that bylaw number 581, 2022, cited Bowen Island Municipality Land bylaw number 57, 2002, amendment bylaw number 581, 2022 be read a third time, and the bylaw number 581, 2022, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Land bylaw number 57, 2002, amendment bylaw number 581, 2022 be reconsidered and finally adopted.
Okay, I'll second that, and I'm going to go Liam.
I was just gonna say, we did hear from one resident a couple of meetings back that
Was it?
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, any further discussion on this? I'll ask a question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, Councillor Wyman and passed. Opposition. Okay, thank you. I don't know, I think that's gonna be fine. Staff reports, development variance permit, DVP 2022-190190 Metro Vancouver Dormant Point, and Manager of Planning and Development.
So I have a development variance permit application associated with Dormant Point with an applicant from Metro Vancouver Regional Parks. So this property is a property that currently has water access or is accessed through Cookman Park. And it was recently purchased by Metro Vancouver Regional Park to be an expansion of Cookman Park. So Metro Vancouver have developed, and we'll go to the next slide that shows it a bit bigger. Has developed some park concepts for how Cookman Park will be sort of expanded, how this site will work as part of Cookman Park. So you can see it's a little bit hard to see, but cursor can, so they show a weather shelter here, a trail that comes in with a viewpoint, comes around, there's a staircase that comes down, circles around, there's a viewpoint here, a bench here comes around to a viewpoint, the trail comes back, and then this branching way comes down here, comes to a staircase to access the beach. And the last thing I'm just going to highlight is in the application, or what this is shown is this red dotted line is the 30-meter setback to the sea. So you can see here it kind of comes to this point and comes out. So everything over this way, everything down this side, and everything on this north side of the line is within that 30-meter setback to the sea. Just highlighted some OCP policies that go through. So encourage mentoring through parks, work with municipality, which I'll say they have been throughout this whole process. And then just some more OCP policies that talk about providing public access to the seashore, the importance of the marine environment as a recreational resource, affirmed through maintenance of existing beach shoreline access and establishment of new beach and shoreline access where it doesn't detrimentally affect the environment and associated wildlife. To develop and maintain public access, and finally to ensure that major costs of providing and maintaining visitor recreation facilities are borne by regional, provincial, and federal agencies. So, but then, yeah, essentially, I'll say like staff and metro staff reviewing this shortly before this meeting and noted that the land use bylaw requires a setback 30 meters from buildings and structures. It has some exemptions, so it exempts stairways and walkways that are not more than 2 meters in height, or other structures not more than 0.6 meters. But we flagged at that point that there were items that would require a variance. We worked collaboratively and quite on a condensed timeline to bring this application here so that it could be introduced and considered in September. So the variances proposed are for the beach staircase, which is over the 2 meter height, the viewpoint 1. And so the beach staircase would be a minimum of 2 meters from the natural boundary of the sea. The viewpoint 1 is over the 0.6 meters in height, and so it's located 11 meters from the natural boundary of the sea, and then the point staircase 25 meters from the natural boundary of the sea. And although the point staircase, it's not completely clear from the material they have to date if that would actually require a variance or would be below the required height, but we sort of reviewed it and decided, okay, we're safer we'd rather include it and have it as part of the variance application. So
What was the third one? Because you've only got 2 in your draft. CVP.
okay, let me go. So maybe actually, thank you, Austin. We might have clarified that it's actually not, it doesn't require one. Let me, after I go through these images, I'll double check and confirm that. But so this is the viewpoint 1 looking north from Dormant Point. So see if the north end, it's sort of higher given the topography of the land, and ends up being higher than is permitted. The point staircase is this one in the middle. And then finally, the beach staircase going down to provide access to the beach on the different side of the point. And that's just in the site plan. So, and I'll note too, that there is an existing stair on this site. So you see this dotted line of the existing staircase that is sort of not the standard that would provide public access, but this is essentially replacing an existing structure with a sort of a safe structure. Yes, the recommendation that notice be given, that it would be considered at the September 26th meeting, and authorize staff to give notice. And I'll just note that the only property within 100 meters is the existing Kirkland Park. So notice would go in the paper and be posted on site, or but
People can see it in the paper.
Yeah,
And we're making info, so we can post online. Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel. David.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. It was so great to read this in the report. You're always going, okay, another DPP. And oh wow, this one's a good one. It's just so great to see the thought and the proposal and what this is going to add to Kirkland Park. It's really
Amazing.
So I obviously support this.
great, thanks, Dave. Yeah, I would invite people to just in terms of in the council report, the end of the report has their full application package. It's really exciting to look through, and you can see the full image of all the structures and what's proposed. And it's great.
Good, we get to see what's. Exciting.
So to give that recommendation.
I support it too. I'd be happy to make it.
Yeah.
If people are ready, I would like to move that notice be given that council will be considering the issuance of development variance permit DVP 2022-0190 for the variance of setback to the sea for Dormant Point, legally described as Lot 6, District Lot 1910, Plan 13749, PID 008 297640 at the September 26th, 2022 meeting of council.
Second.
You want to do it all?
Sorry, is there more? Oh, and that council authorize staff to give notice for the consideration of issuance of notice be given that council, that council authorized staff to give notice for the consideration of issuance of development variance permit DVP 2022-0190 in accordance with section 499 of the Local Government Act to all properties within the 100 meters of the legal boundary of Dorman Point, legally described as Lot 6, District Lot 1910, Plan 13749, PID 008297640.
Thank you.
Now I'll second.
Okay, seconded. Any further discussion on this? All in favor? Aye, thank you. Super. Okay. Temporary use permit and TUP 2022-0166 Bowen Island Properties. Back to you, Daniel. See you.
Thank you. So I'm introducing an application for a temporary use permit from the Bowen Island Properties. So we received an application for a temporary use permit located on this district lot, so located at the end of an existing gravel access road up the top, sort of past Seymour Bay, what would be a continuation of Seymour Bay Drive. The gravel road, and the location is currently used as a gravel deposit. So Bowen,
What's that? Could you show on the map?
yeah.
Is that where Seymour Bay is?
Seymour Bay is sort of down right there. This is
No,
all
but
the
look-
floors.
I'm looking at the red map. That line.
Yeah, this is not.
That's wrong.
This is still the Dorman Point.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. I was just going.
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah.
Somebody's waiting.
Got the test.
One person got it.
So Bowen Island Property has applied for a temporary use permit to build a temporary facility to fabricate within the housing component and panels for a 3-year period. So Bowen Island Properties, in part of their counterpoint development, have tried a number of different technologies to essentially reduce the cost of housing development. You may recall there's a series on Russell Lane where they actually barged in prefabricated housing components of housing. They've tried, a variety of different methods, and so what they've decided, I think, is that the most economical way for them to build their housing is essentially a way where they can fabricate panels in one sort of weather secured location to then install on site. So they've applied for this temporary use permit. So the official community plan has these policies and objectives about temporary use. So restoration of temporary use permits for short-term seasonal users. A consideration in temporary land use permit for the use will not create an unacceptable negative impact on the natural environment or the character of the neighborhood. So this is the site. So it's in zone area 8 of the CD6 zone. So the zone permits for dwelling use and retreat center use, and it is currently undeveloped. So a recent subdivision did take place on Shore Lane, sort of below Seymour Bay Drive as it comes down here. So 2 pieces of lots and a strata development. But this area is slated for future residential development, but it's not part of the current, our current development application at this point. And so Bowen Island Properties have determined, sort of the ideal location for their operations, thinking that this will be part of their housing construction on other lots in Callan Point, but is not currently sort of removed from current existing development. So staff will review existing land use bylaw definitions, and so I believe that the temporary use permit would be for light manufacturing, but with a condition, so restricting that light manufacturing use for the fabricating, assembly, storing, servicing, repairing, or repurposing of building components for use on Bowen Island. And then I'll just further add that the report goes into detail in terms of the building would be served by water from the Counterpoint utility and would have an on-site septic field and is located outside of any development permit area. So the recommendation is that notice be given that council would consider it at the meeting September 26th. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Daniel. Interesting one. Really.
It's nice to see something so innovative, actually. Let's see how this goes on. They're going to fabricate on site. Who knows? This may prove to be extremely successful, and now we're going to find out for real.
Okay. What about noise? Will everything be done inside? And anything outside?
The permit doesn't specify that, like if that's it, but other than it would just have to conform to our noise bylaw. But if that's a consideration of council, then that could be conditions that we put on the permit.
It's not near any real house.
I know it is,
at this point.
but it doesn't mean the sound doesn't travel. I don't want to see a whole bunch of sound outside of an industrial area.
Find the temporary use permit.
Yeah, how long is a temporary use permit?
For a 3-year period.
And they would have the option to,
They would have the option to apply to renew the council.
How much traffic?
Sorry, so yeah, 3 years is the longest term that a local government can issue. They can then apply for a renewal, and at the end of that 3 years, they could apply again for a new temporary use permit for the same use for another, so they could continue to apply and council would continue to.
About traffic.
I mean, it would drive some traffic in terms of deliveries and removals of equipment.
Not equipment, the panels,
Yeah, so I guess, it would bring lumber and
Materials and.
material and finished product.
Yeah.
I don't mind moving that.
Yeah.
Second that.
So we got a recommendation.
Yeah, I guess you better.
That the notice be given that council will be considering the issuance of temporary use permit 2022-0166 for light manufacturing use at the property legally described as District Lot 2448 Group 1, Westminster Districts. Accept plans EPP 55410 and EPP 55411 PID 015902439 at the September 26, 2022 meeting of council, and that council authorized staff to give those for consideration of the issuance of temporary use permit 2022-0156 for light manufacturing use at a properly legally described as the District Lot 2448 Group 1 Westminster District. Accept plans EPP 55410 and EPP 55411 PID 015902439.
Second.
There we go.
Any further discussion? Oh, I guess we get seconds.
Yep, first second.
And further discussion.
thank you. I don't have very much to say here, except you had brought up the idea of noise, and that seems to be part of the construction industry, whether it's those rock picks and different kinds of blasting and things that happen, and they're all covered by the noise bylaw. So I think what I saw in the drawings was, it looks like a fairly enclosed building, or does it have it's totally enclosed? Yeah, okay, thank you. Then I don't have that concern.
All right. Anybody else?
I just have a curiosity question. The numbering of the permit is 0156, so we haven't processed 156.
0166.
So
yeah, the permit number is given by our permitting software, and it's the total number of permit applications that we enter.
whether they're DDPs, CPs, or, so that's just for this calendar year.
Yeah.
And 100.
Can I just say, one of them says 1066, the top one, and the second one says 105, 0156.
Yeah, so it is 0166.
Okay, so in the second motion there,
Yeah.
that Rob read out in 0166.
Yeah, they'll do that here.
Okay.
You can ask me to repeat it.
Okay, I'll ask a question. Allison, is that?
I stuck my hand up.
We're gonna move on to correspondence, of which there is none, and reports of committees, county commissions, community economic development plan recommendations and proposed approach to implementation. Community Economic Development Committee, Councilors Morris and Nicholson. July 11th, 2022.
So I'll take this up.
Thank you.
And Allison can jump in. At you. So the recommendation that the agency is bringing to council, that council will not formally adopt the community economic development plan engagement and strategy report at this time. And the council adopt in principle the approach to implementation that's outlined in this report, dated July the 11th. So the report responds to council direction that was given at the end of last year, following the presentation of what was then called the Community Economic Development Plan. And we referred it out, council referred it out to CEBC for its consideration and for recommendations on how to move forward with adoption and implementation of the plan. And the response that's described in the memo that you have here is that we don't recommend that formal adoption. And the members of the committee were not confident that the recommendations in the report were sufficiently researched, feasible, and prioritized so as to constitute a strategic plan. So to actually adopt it, if you recall, the plan was plentiful. It had lots of ideas.
Lots of ideas.
Yeah. But it wasn't especially,
Tailored.
it hadn't been prioritized, it hadn't been, anyway, there were some shortcuts. So we spent, the committee spent some time in debrief meeting and then a workshop and then a couple of committee discussions to review the report in depth and to figure out what those next steps for implementation might be. And Liam participated in some of the meetings, and the majority of the committee did as well. So the approach that we chose was we looked at the various economic sectors and we thought about what was doable on the part of the committee, and we focused in on 3 of those sectors: the knowledge, digital economy, commercial and industrial, and housing. And we advanced work on those sectors by initially hosting a meeting for the folks who work in the knowledge and digital economy. We had a lunch meeting, a good chat. The lead on that particular sector is Christian Enemark, who's a committee member, and I forget what her title is, but she's senior with Shaw. And then affordable housing, Allison and I worked on that. We prepared a survey, which is later on the agenda. And our first step was really to get a perspective on housing from the view of business owners in the community. So the emphasis really is on business. And then there's some discussion going on in the background that will sort of come forward in September on commercial and industrial uses. That hasn't advanced very far. So the initial steps are small steps. Exploring who the people are now on the ground on Bowen who work in the knowledge and digital economy area. The attendance at that particular session that we had was rather small, but the feedback was good. And we sort of came away with the sense of people have actually, walking away with the sense that people have actually learned a lot about remote work in the last 2 years. Because 2.5 years ago, when we convened a meeting for remote workers, it was full, completely full. We probably had 30, 35 people in the room. It's kind of smaller. And the affordable housing, I'll say a little bit more about it. But we wanted to bring this to council. So you know our basic recommendation, don't adopt, and that we want to proceed incrementally on these economic sectors. And if you're comfortable with us taking that approach, we'll continue. If there's another approach that you want us to take that you think would be better, if there's a sector that you think we particularly need to focus on, I'd love to hear that. So It's a short report, but your feedback on how we're going about this would really be welcome. Allison, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think Maureen did most of the work, so. On writing the report, yeah.
Staff did a significant.
We have staff have forgotten. She's been pushing this stuff.
Well, I think it's a productive, more productive way to approach it for sure.
We don't have the manpower to do it.
No. The recommendation is the council not formally adopt a community economic development plan engagement strategy. Or at this time, the council approved principle the approach to implementation outlined in the report text community economic development plan recommendations and proposed approach to implementation dated July 11th, 2022. I'll move that. Okay, I've got a second for Michael and Sue.
Yes, I just want to say I support this approach because I was part of some of the and I watched, I think, the presentation from the consultants and lots of good ideas. But I gotta say, these past 2 years have been so significant in terms of the changes in various parts of our economy and the way our island works. And also, potentially, I don't know whether you think this, but potentially in terms of the people coming to meetings and participating in our engagement things, including yours. I'm not sure about that. Maybe you want to comment on that, but I was looking in the report for where exactly the approach was outlined, and what I picked up mostly is initial steps are small steps, proceed incrementally, is what you just said. And where is that exactly in the report? I just would like to be able to later
In our 2-page report.
yeah. Because our motion, the draft motion here seeks specifically approve in principle the approach to implementation outlined in the report. I guess it's the
It's on the table.
the table, because the table just outlines section leads and
But it talks about the task, which is the selected priority recommendation.
yeah.
That first column.
So I think the recommendations is like a proven principle, the approach of information.
In the table.
Well, outlined in the overall report itself from H&K, and which is about basically sector by sector, issue by issue. You tackle each one, but there's so many in the report. There's no way that we could actually do it.
It's probably the last line on the first page. At its workshop in March, CEDC members identified one recommendation from each sector to implement and identified a lead spearhead.
Okay. Thank you. That's the clarification I was looking for. I just was going off. I'm not getting it. Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Last question, all in favor? Thank you, Maureen. And so we're going to move on to 10.2, which is Community Grants Advisory Committee recommendation, July 2022. Kristen Watson is waiting so patiently in the back. So patient. Thank you, Kristen. Go ahead.
Thank you, Commander. I'll speak tonight, just I'll go through a little bit of the that took place for the committee this year and coming up with their recommendation. The committee received 5 grant applications. All 5 of those applications were digitized and distributed out to committee members. There was one committee member who actually declared a conflict of interest because she was involved in the application process for one of the groups. So she actually recused herself from participating in the process on the evaluation of any of the grants. So we did have that one interesting event that happened this year. Councillor Nicholson stepped in for Councillor Kale, who wasn't available this year for the committee. So we had a couple of new faces at the table. This was a little bit interesting. So 5 applications were received. The applications were consolidated, distributed to the members. members reviewed the applications, and any questions that they had were funneled to the chair of the committee, who then directed those questions to the applicants themselves to provide additional information or some clarification on some things that needed it in the application. And then we had a meeting. The meeting was held July 14th, and the applications were considered and discussed at that meeting by the committee members. An initial amount was suggested by the committee members, and then some refinements, some adjustments were made, and ending up that all of the grant applications received something. The first one, Caring Circle, received exactly what they had requested, 15,000, or the recommendation from the committee is that Caring Circle received the full amount of their request. Bowen Island Family Place requested 12, and the committee is recommending that they receive 10,400. Bowen Island Community Festival Society, which is BoFest, requested 2,500. The committee is recommending 1,000. This was Bowen Island Montessori School, who's partnering with a sort of an ad hoc group on the west side to create the West Side Playscape project. They requested 28,353, and the committee's recommending that that group receive 20,000. And the last one is the Right on Bowen Festival Society, who is requesting $1,500, and the committee recommended that that request be granted in full. So the total amount available to grant this year is $47,900, and the final grant amounts there add up to that total of $47,900. One further thing that I just would like to relay back to council was that the committee is having some struggling a bit with making recommendations on those organizations such as Caring Circle and Family Place that provide those very regular core services to the community. And the committee feels that those ones should not be coming to the committee for consideration. So they have indicated that they would like to undertake a little bit of work, probably this fall, to come up with an alternative method to deal with those ongoing annual requests that come from those groups. So we'll stay tuned for that. Councilor Nicholson, was there anything you wanted to add to that? No.
Other than it went very smoothly.
Yeah, it was a very good meeting, good discussion.
Okay.
So you're gonna read the motion?
Sure. So the recommendation then is from the committee is that council accept the recommendation of the Community Grants Advisory Committee and award the following grants. Caring Circle, 15,000, Bowen Island Family Place, 10,400, Bowen Island Community Festival Society, 1,000, Bowen Island Montessori School in support of the West Side Playscape project, 20,000, and the Right on Bowen Festival Society, 1,500. Total recommended grant amounts, 47,900.
Yeah, I'll move that. Thanks, David. And further discussion. What, just Bowen Island Family Place, what were they requesting?
They requested 12 and the committee was recommended 10 for.
Okay. Gary, could I just thank Councilor Nicholson who took over my place with a combination of COVID and family visit. So much appreciated. Thank you very much indeed.
For an admirable job, Simone.
Since we're doing thank yous, I'd just like to thank Kristen, but especially the committee, because this is not easy to think about people that you know in the community and groups that you've worked in and been on the board of and needed help from or whatever. And thank you very much for the volunteers who did the hard work of coming up with these recommendations.
They're very skillful at moving the conversation.
Yeah, there, was fortunate there was only 5 applicants.
Yeah. It seems like there's fewer number of applicants than previous years. Is that?
Yeah.
Usually have about 10 or 12, sometimes 14. Yeah. Anyway, that's good. And and no further discussion. We'll ask question 1 favor. Hi, terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen, for to keep you.
No problem.
Videos. Okay, so 10.3 as a result of the staff housing solutions survey. Councilman. Nicholson.
So I've given you a written report and I've got to report about our orange.
Okay. Super.
So this is one of those incremental pieces coming out of the CEDC.
Not ready.
It's suspense. Yeah.
Oh, you're good.
Okay. Go to the next slide, please. That's interesting. It's come over as a part. That's in PDF. Anyway, the purpose of the survey was to provide information to assist with planning to better meet staff housing needs with seasonal year-round staff of relevant businesses, and to advance work on a housing priority, which was identified as a cross-cutting priority affecting all economic sectors on Bowen in the CED plan and engagement and strategy. So next slide, please. This is the related direction from council, which we looked at in my previous report. So on to the next slide. So this is the basics of the survey. It ran from the 16th of June to the 8th of July, so just about a 3-week period. We wanted to make it short and sweet. Didn't think that having it out there much longer would result in greater responses. People would respond and they wouldn't, especially at the time that we were asking. And if you remember when this was being initially proposed, there were some comments about, well, if staff is needed, people will have staff housing is needed. People will have found that housing by this point. And interestingly, the survey did not show that. So there were 56 responses, and we asked 12 questions. The number of staff who require housing, seasonal staff, year-round staff, and current, just that little snapshot right at the beginning of July. What type of housing they needed. We were curious about whether there would be differences between the year-round staff and the seasonal staff. And sure enough, there were. Off-island employees, whether any of the off-island employees might be interested in living or prefer, to live on Bowen Island if there were housing. The next bullet point: how employers help employees to find housing. I think solicited some of the most interesting responses in the survey. Interest in what I'm calling innovative options, and the 3 options that we presented in the survey. One was essentially a matchmaking service that overhoused group meets understaffed, where a private homeowner might provide a room or other space for an employee, but the arrangement was at the level of the employer. The second option was temporary use permits, and what kind of feedback you might get there, kind of uptake there might be. And then the third option was some sort of collaborative project, not a muni-driven project, but a collaborative project that would be undertaken by Bowen business owners who were facing stresses in accommodating their staff. We asked about type of business, and that's essentially the type of business license that people have. And then the impact of housing availability on business. So if you go to the next slide, one of the things that was unique about this particular survey in relation to some of the more recent work that we've done is that focus on Bowen business owners. They were the target. That's what we wanted to hear from. And when I went looking, and this may be wrong, there may be more research out there on this, but this is what I found. Margaret Eberly, back in 2007, in the Affordable Housing Needs Assessment that she did at that time, looked at firms with employees, and the number of firms with employees at that time was if I can read that properly, and if I can, you guys probably can't either, 84. And her survey, her assessment looked at how, whether there were employees who commute to business, to work, whether businesses were having trouble hiring, lack of housing affecting business growth, units needed for employees now, and units needed in 3 to 5 years. The units needed for employees now, back in 2007, identified as 26, and in 3 to 5 years, 60. So keep in mind that this reflects 84 firms with employees. And then the organics report, the official housing needs assessment that we had done, did not focus, it didn't have a section that dealt with the needs of Bowen Island businesses. So this is really, this survey is really looking through the lens of business needs for staff housing. So on to the next slide, please. So one of the things that's changed since the 2007 and was just really coming into play in 2020 was we introduced business licensing. And rather than 84 firms with employees, we're looking at 605 business licenses. Not all of those business license holders have employees, but based on data that I received from Tess Taylor, she estimates that there are about 520 regular employees, not including owners, so just employees on island, and about 310 additional seasonal employees who are brought into the picture. Those numbers do not include off-island contractors. Tess takes those, they're a large group, but she takes them out of the calculation for employees because it doesn't make sense to fully count them. So there's a little screenshot here that just picks up on the responses to question 9, and it gives you a sense of who responded to the survey. So the largest group was, as you would expect, was the commercial folks, the retail and restaurant group, and then the second largest in the tie was contractors, and then accommodation, same number, and we didn't see much need for staff housing being reported by the accommodation providers, because for the most part, they were hiring people who were already living on the island and had homes or had a place to stay. And then the home-based businesses, similarly, we didn't see much need there for support of that group of license holders. And non-resident business owners, well, they just simply didn't bother responding to the survey at all. Not a single one chose to respond. And then there were some folks who didn't know what kind of business license they had, or they really weren't very sure about some of the responses here. So the big groups, the meaningful groups, are the contractors and the commercial folks on island. So I'm now going to go through the responses to all of the questions. If you've got questions about them, or if there's something that jumped out at you and you thought, oh, that's something that should be brought up in the context of this meeting, I won't have time for that. But these are my key takeaways. The first one is that even at midsummer, Bowen business owners still have seasonal staff who are seeking housing. And the number that was estimated, this is at the beginning of July, when you look at the responses from, in this case, from 53 of our business license holders. So that's not very many of the total business license holders, but they're identifying that they still need 61 plus places for their staff. That's actually a very large number, especially given the low response rate in this survey. And then suitable housing types differ depending on whether employees are seasonal or year-round. You know, they express that, no, they don't want their year-round employees living in an RV. You know, that's not a good fit, but it might be perfectly fine for somebody who's coming in, you know, as a seasonal employee. So if we're thinking about trying to help particular parts of the economy, particular types of housing is going to support different parts. The majority of the business owners who have employees who would move to Bowen if suitable housing were available. The business owners use a variety of approaches to help their staff find housing, ranging from advertisements to leases with private homeowners. There's one person who responds that every summer he or she gets 5 leases with homeowners so that they can house their staff, and then word of mouth, which came up probably most frequently. And then they face the owners and the staff face significant negative impacts from limited housing availability. And the most significant impact is related to the ability to hire and retain staff. And if you look at the Everly report from 2007, and you look at what people are saying now, the ability to hire and retain appears much worse currently. And then owner and staff burnout. So those 4 items, ability to hire, ability to retain, owner and staff burnout are sort of the top ranked impacts on local business owners. So next slide, please. So the limitations to this survey, it doesn't affect housing affordability. We took for granted that affordability was going to be an issue. And we have research from the housing needs assessment and from the island survey that gives us some information there on affordability. It was intended for business owners, not employees or the general public. And then finally, the response rate affects generalizability. However, we asked as a final question for the owners, it's an optional question, if you'd like, say who you are. And what we know from the responses is that we probably managed to get responses from the majority of the large business operators on island. It makes sense. They would be motivated to respond to something like this because they were experiencing need. So as I said, I'm not going to go through all of the questions and answers. I'll leave that to you guys if you have questions or comments, and then just go on to the recommendations. Next slide. So you can either just receive this for information, or you can comment and you can refer it to staff, the Housing Advisory Committee, and the Community Economic Development Committee for their review and action. So thank you for your attention.
That's great.
I think we should refer it to receive it and refer it to the Housing Committee. I mean, it's a given, I guess, that it would go to the Economic Development Committee because that's where it started.
Yeah.
I think the Housing Committee was looking for it and hoping to get it. So.
Yeah, second that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Maybe just very minor. I think you've done an amazing amount of work here, and thank you for doing that. It's really great information. I'd be happy to just have a quick look through and some of the math is not adding up, and I can maybe tweak that and before it goes to the committee.
Yeah, it does add up, but the technique that's used is what needs to be explained to Allison, and I went through that.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we'll talk before it comes out.
Right. Was that recommendations that?
The council receives the results of the staff housing solution survey for information and refer it to the Housing Advisory Committee.
Housing Advisory. Okay, thanks, Rob. Any further discussion on that? Well done.
Did anything jump out at you though?
And the size, just the numbers.
Yeah.
The various questions that, you know, your first one, okay, that's big, and then next, oh, that's bigger.
Yeah.
And then, but I was really interested in, staff would move to Bowen. I thought that was really interesting.
I think you've got a good Rolodex now, of all the businesses who apply, so now you've got a good list of all the people who are sufficiently invested to.
Yeah, I think just reading some of those comments, it's amazing how much of it's just word of mouth. That by the time housing becomes available to somebody, it's gone. It has to be done before that.
You've got to know what's coming up.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. So,
Well, thanks for this. I think this kind of targeted survey is really helpful. And I was wondering how many people these are going to get, being it's such a busy time of the year. And it sounds like we've got a lot of the bigger employers, as you say, so that should be helpful, and equals 85 is pretty good, I guess, for a 3-week survey result. And so that I think that's helpful. I was surprised that so many people didn't have housing lined up for seasonal staff, that was an issue in midsummer. But I think things are still turning over that quickly. And also staff are losing housing as soon as they get it sometimes. Yeah, no, I think it's good with
quite apparent.
the housing advisory committee. I support that, and I think bringing in the 2007 info from the Liberal report is a good idea, because that was an issue even then, and it's only getting stronger. It makes me wonder about purpose rental or something for seasonal. Anyway, I don't know, but thank you. I just support making it available. Okay.
yeah, certainly, you know, you see that there is a struggle, even if they do get accommodation for their employees. It's a struggle. It's not easy. It's not like they can just come and get accommodation. No question about that. It's word of mouth, or they're putting in somebody's house for a while and kind of moving things around and making it work. But no, it's not easy. Certainly.
The business impact section, I also found that really, really interesting. And I hadn't expected so many of the contractors, for example, to talk about the impact of travel costs on their bottom line because they don't have staff housing on island. And it's a very, very high proportion of them. It was almost all of them actually responded that that was very significant.
Not the dollars count.
Yeah. Okay.
Especially if you're paying your employee from Horseshoe Bay.
Yeah.
You know, that would be
Well, that was the other thing, that
that's
the
a
travel time gets built into
Oh,
the
absolutely.
cost of doing or into the cost of what you're building.
Anyway, that's great
I
information.
have one more question.
Sure.
Sorry, I didn't go deep into the report, but it seems to me that years ago, young people on Bowen, college, high school and university students would
Work in the business.
work in the businesses. Did you get any indication about how much that had changed?
No, we didn't have a question on those lines, but just from word of mouth and thinking about it, and talking to people with kids, a lot of them are seeking opportunities off island, and some of them they're in co-op programs, so they want the job that matches.
So
Okay, I just wondered, I didn't see the question and if you had any. Okay, thank you. Could we vote?
No, we're going to vote right now. If there's no further discussion, I'll ask a question. All in favor? All right, great, thank you. Going down to new business, Bowen Island Municipalities Island Trust requisition, Councilor Trustee Kale. Thank you, Michael.
Okay, well, last regular council meeting, I said I would bring forward this recommendation, and I wonder if you could just bear with me, because what I'd like to do is just cover off the 5 whereas to begin with, and then any thoughts on wording or any comments perhaps we could sort of break off at that point, and I'll explain why when we get to the end. Firstly, since incorporation in 1999, the requisition formula for Bowen has never been reviewed. The annual tax requisition in dollar terms is averaging in the area of 320,000 annually, and that's derived purely from the formula, of which we have no input consultation as a municipality. Uniquely within the trust area, Bowen Island is the only municipality and provides its own complete range of services to its community. Bowen Island municipality will be supportive of Island's trust in its request to the provincial government regarding an increase of the annual provincial contribution. And that Bowen Island municipality seeks value for money in all its service agreements, therefore seeking a review of the existing requisition formula. Now, I actually believe that these points won't come as too much of a surprise because in speaking to Liam already, there is a sort of like a mandate or an understanding that these conversations with the Islands Trust would be taking place. They just haven't had time to do so. So in a way, although we've couched out the 5 reasons, the conversations haven't as yet taken place. But council has, I think, given direction that they should. But what I would like to ask at this point is for any comments on the wordings of the 5 whereases, if there's any errors or if there's any wording improvements that could be given there that I would welcome.
I'd kind of like to see in the Islands Trust Act inserted after requisition formula in the first whereas.
Okay, so the requisition,
Yeah,
the requisition formula, sorry, Alison.
in the Islands, as per the Islands Act, Trust Act.
As per the Islands Trust Act. Okay. Yeah. Anything else, Alison?
No, I think that just makes it clear that
Okay.
it's the Islands Trust Act that's going to have to be.
Rob?
Yes, my comment is just, because we've been around this a couple of times already, and my initial concern with going forward is there was this mix of, there was this sentiment out there too that we can actually leave the trust and whatnot, and I think that sort of muddies the water. I think this is pretty clear that it's just looking straight at, are we paying the appropriate amount or not, and I have no problem doing that. I think that makes sense. It's probably something that we should be doing on a regular basis anyway. So I'm just glad that that's clear in here, that that's not what the intent is, and it's just to look at the requisition.
Yes, yeah. And I wanted that to be very clear. So I'll happily expand on that. If there's any other questions regarding.
Sorry, you can't see the wording very well back there. I wonder about the words service agreements in the last whereas above the therefore. I wouldn't call it a service agreement. I mean, we're an island in the Islands Trust area as defined by the Act. So we're part of the local government system, or the federation it's sometimes called, but service area service agreement. I would prefer to replace that with the Federation of Islands.
Okay, the value of money for service agreements generically, how would you like the one for the Islands Trust referred to?
No, okay, I just want to, I'm going to withdraw. I think that people on Bowen, as per the trust policy statement consultation, I think they see this is sort of part of the Environment and Parks budget. That's the kind of service, and that's what I gather. It's my personal, what I get from that session down there on the boardwalk, and just from people chatting. So it's not, I'm not adding any words here. I'm just saying, I think that's what people feel, but that's fine.
What would you call them if you didn't want to call them service agreements? It's like, it's a comparison to what we pay Metro.
Any contractual agreement.
Where we have the value of money. Yes.
What do we call it, Metro Vancouver?
It's a tax requisition.
Yeah, the tax requisition. I think that's what this is a tax requisition. And, value, but we don't go seeking value from Metro Vancouver. Do we renew that, tax requisition? Have we reviewed those?
Oh, we did
How
have,
did that, how did that of interest?
Well, we do look at the tax requisition for all the taxing authorities. And, you know, the Metro Vancouver tax requisition is about half of the Islands Trust requisition, and it's less than half. And from a value for money perspective, and from an operational perspective, it is very good value for money. The amount of service that's provided through just the Metro Parks alone is significant. TransLink, I would argue that
What it is.
yeah, we don't get much there, but we do talk with them about it. And we try to increase the level of service.
Doesn't that include doesn't that include all the bridges and infrastructure in Vancouver that our people
That we
like to use?
Yeah. It does, yeah.
So that's consideration.
I didn't realize that staff had been talking to,
Why don't we change service agreements to expenditures?
There you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's, I value this because it's the basis, because why? This idea came to a little while, some time ago, when I looked at the survey on the Islands Trust budget. Then I looked at the survey on the policy statement. And quite frankly, there were some pretty unkind, bitter things said on the subject of Islands Trust. And I wanted this to be particularly focused, because there is an audience out there which says, well, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. No, we're part of this federation, worked hard on a lot of changes, worked hard on some new directions, but I have to make it very clear that no, we're not going to leave this in abeyance, and it's going to be absolutely targeted and directed. I think it's very important, and the motion I would put that the community opinion poll be held in conjunction with the October 15th, 2022 municipal election to ask the Bowen Island community, do you support a renegotiating Bowen Island's annual tax formula within the Islands Trusts? Because if Liam is to have a conversation with the CEO of Islands Trust, if it is to get some political traction, I think it is very important that the island indicates one way or another the strength of feeling of the subject. After they're asking this to be renegotiated, that's the open wording here. And I think it's important for the people tasked with that, and Liam, it has already been tasked with it, to know the degree of support it's going to get on the island. So the motion, if I may, is that the community opinion poll be held in conjunction with the October 15, 2022 municipal election to ask Bowen Island community, do you support negotiating Bowen Island's annual tax requisition within the Islands Trust? And I'm going to ask if I can have a second for that.
Two little changes I want to make.
Yeah.
Maureen's got her minutes.
Sorry.
one is an editorial and then the second relates to the therefore clause. In your second whereas, can you just revise it to take it up a bit? And whereas annual tax requisition in dollar terms for Bowen Island is averaging in the area of 320, and then get rid of that annually for Bowen Island.
Bowen Island in the area, sorry, it is averaging in the area annually for Bowen. Just take away this.
Yeah.
Absolutely derived here. Yes.
And then the second point is in the therefore clause. The question I have is who is renegotiating and with whom? Because it's not clear to me from asking that, do you support question? Who's doing it?
Do you support Bowen Island municipal?
Okay, municipality.
Yeah, it has to be more than we.
Renegotiating.
I think renegotiating has to come after
Negotiating with.
Well, it's a bit of a, we struggled with this term renegotiating. It's about, well, yeah, negotiating with the province to amend the legislation. And initial discussions with the trust CAO, they're supportive to go to the province to have that discussion.
Yes.
With, and that we would support them as well, and they're asked to the province to increase the provincial contribution, which is not increased over time. So really it's about Bowen Island municipality going to the provincial government to seek the ability to amend the legislation.
Okay, so Bowen municipality renegotiating Bowen Island's annual trust. And we used to
Don't make it too
work within the Islands Trust. The idea basically would start off with the CAO, and then we'd have to involve the provincial government with their support as well. So I accept all of those changes. So are you okay with those changes? Probably better than my handwriting written.
Yeah.
Written.
Could you read where that landed? The
Second word,
so there.
but therefore be it resolved.
that a community of connection with the October 15th, 2022 election. You ask the Bowen Island community, do you support Bowen Island municipality in negotiating Bowen Island's annual tax requisition from the Islands Trust?
Is there a after renegotiating with the province?
Or with the Islands Trust and the province?
With those.
The Islands Trust and the province. So do you support Bowen Island municipality that renegotiating
Goes after.
With the Islands Trust and the provincial government.
The province and the support of the Islands Trust, the annual tax requisition formula.
I don't think we can say the support. I don't think we can.
We don't know.
Well, then renegotiate with Bowen Island with the Bowen Island municipality renegotiating with the province and the Islands Trust, the annual tax requisition formula as in the Islands Trust Act.
There you go.
Well,
Okay.
yes, just give me that. Thank you. I'm going to ask you. So did you get what Alison just said? And if so, would you be kind enough to read it back in its entirety?
Yes, so it's do you support Bowen Island municipality renegotiating with the province and the Islands Trust, Bowen Island's annual tax requisition formula within the Islands Trust Act?
Okay, certainly acceptable.
David and then.
Okay, so I haven't thought about this for a few years. We were thinking about it, nearly 4 years ago. I felt that it didn't seem fair to me when I looked at the logic and how it was done. And I don't remember why I didn't think that. I don't remember my math at the time or my logic at the time. However, we did have then a review, and the review came out that it's basically okay, or they changed it a little bit. So I guess
Nothing changed in the end.
what I'm asking is, for people who have more expertise than I who've been following this, I guess I'm leaning towards Liam particularly, do you think there's something unfair about the requisition? I agree it's very high compared to Metro Vancouver's, but is there something about the act that makes it worthy of being renegotiated?
Yes, I do. And I think that, so first, I think that the requisition formula was established when, it was amended when Bowen Island became a municipality to recognize a municipal government.
Before that.
And so in that time, I don't think it was contemplated like how much autonomy and independence an island municipality would have from the trust itself. And so the requisition sections within the act really speak to, the municipality still contributing to the core functioning of the administration of the trust in the same way that any other island would. However, I think that Bowen Island municipality has demonstrated a higher degree of independence and autonomy. So 22 years later, or 20 however many years later, I think it's time to revisit that and go to the province and say, I think that the formula, now that we have been operating for 20 years, needs to be revisited and needs to be reconsidered. And if not for the functions that we're paying for, then how they calculate the payments, which are right now strictly based on assessed values.
Yes, that's right.
And so.
Yeah, okay, now I remember.
And the other element that is unfair, that isn't really directly related to Bowen, but to the trust itself, is that the provincial contribution to the island's trust administration has never been increased since its inception. And that is brutal. So the island's trust in its entirety
Less than it used
continues to the balance is quite indifferent. And then to take that one step further, trust staff are effectively provincial employees. And so if trust staff are provincial employees and it's a quasi special purpose local government that's more heavily managed by the province, then the province should be paying more.
And to add to that, all the assets that the trust conservancy holds are being held for the province. They are assets that belong to the province.
Okay, thanks. So I'm approving action, but my second point now is so I'm just wondering about an opinion poll. So I did a lot of opinion poll work in my life. I used to work for an opinion poll firm for a while. And the trouble with opinion polls, you can ask, a values question, like, do you agree with capital punishment? And people know whether they agree with it or not. But then when you ask a complicated question, like the details of a carbon tax, for example, I did a bunch of work on that. Nobody really has a clue. And so, or I shouldn't say that. That was an exaggeration. But there's a lot of confusion about detailed things that you don't really know how to answer. And so for most people who haven't heard what I just heard, and who have less knowledge than I do about it, and I don't have much, they wouldn't really know, oh yeah, okay, I guess if somebody says it's unfair, I'm in favor of dealing with it. But the province will know that people don't really know a heck of a lot about it.
It's pretty straightforward. I mean, the amount is there, and the fact that we duplicate services. So what we're saying nicely is that we do not, if the trust left us tomorrow, nothing would change.
So that gets to my point though. If you're going to ask a question like this, are we also going to provide some information?
Yeah. Well, yeah,
that's the trouble. Are we providing information and say this fact, and then put the question, or is it just going to be these words?
Well, these whereases are all in there, aren't they? Or, oh no,
they're not going to be.
Well, it will be the basis of communications, because I mean, obviously the question has to be short. It shouldn't be a long, rambling question. And really the place was, well, look, we're going to go into these negotiations. We're going to have to demonstrate some communication.
I agree. We have to.
The sincerity of the total understanding of everything that's happened since incorporation is indeed complex, and do people fully understand it? I'm sure they don't.
I think what we need then, I mean, I'm not opposing this. I'm just worried just because of some of the work that I've done. I think what we need to do is make sure we have some really good articles in the undercurrent that sort of explain the history and so on, and how the background of all this works.
Yes, no, so we totally agree. It's going to be down. We've got two trustees here, and I think it's going to be down to us to do just that. And this will put it up for discussion as well. I think if anything, it will increase the level of understanding by the time we get to what we're doing.
Right, it'll be productive one way or the other.
So, thank you. I have a couple of things to say. One of them is to answer some questions. So back in 1994-95, the provincial grant to the Islands Trust was 469,000. Today it's 180,000. So it has really died, and that's after a period in the middle that former trustee Morse would be able to tell us where it went up and down, which was all very difficult for the staff to figure out what to do with the 50,000 grant when they had 318 the year before. So now at least it's stabilized, but it's that's a third low, a 2/3 lower, and than it used to be. So that's just one piece of information, and I don't think it would be exactly the same. I've been working on adding up the different benefits and how they particularly relate to Bowen, and I can share that if people want to. And in your packages, I put probably way more information than you want, but just as a place for people to refer to if this topic is, so you can see what's involved with getting the information out to the public and what's available. For example, there has been Islands Trust sent a mailing to new residents of Bowen earlier this spring, I think in March. And this information is included in the info section. I've got a whole bunch of things down in info items under 12.2. And there's some good stuff in here, by the way, about water, and we might want to steal some of it. But anyway, that's, otherwise we have to be careful what we ask for. Right now, we pay less than the other islands, about 30% less, the way the formula is there. So that's what I've put in this on table bit, was the email where Kristen talked with the Islands Trust, Julia Mobbs, and then Councillor Morrison, Trustee Kale and I came in. We had a little chat about it to see what the numbers crunched. But anyway, my main thing is that I think this would be really polarizing around the election time. And that was really at the time of the national park question. That referendum there was damaging to our community, I think, because it polarized people's ideas about what was happening on Bowen Island and what was important. And there was a lot of discussion that could have been helpful, constructive discussion, sort of got into the them and us side of things. And I'm concerned, as Councillor Hawking mentions, about how would people answer that question when there's so many new people, there's so little information that's available to Bowen Islanders, because we've got 20 years without having the Islands Trust business happening in and around our community with the local trust committee meetings and that kind of thing about land use. So I'm, anyway, I'll be voting against this motion because of the bit about the community information opinion poll being held in conjunction with the October 15th election, because I think that's that would be a waste of lots of I think it would be really polarizing when it's not necessary, because we don't even know that the province would reopen negotiations around this part of the Islands Trust Act, because there's so much.
It's just an opinion.
An opinion poll at election time turns into more than that. And that's what I'm saying.
No, and I think it's a valid.
I said my point.
I think it's a valid point, and that's why we stress within the Islands Trust and the support, working with them to support they have friendship. So I can't add any more than that. I think that's good.
All right. So is everybody happy? Oh, sorry, Rob.
Just a comment, like, because I hear what Swell and David are saying. I mean, I would be just as happy to have that last word of not there, like not do a survey and whatnot, and just go ahead and really go like to the negotiation with them. I like I don't see any gaps.
To get the public
either one way or the other
to give weight really to these negotiations and to get
we've tried
that it's community driven. Otherwise, it isn't going to be.
Well,
it's thinking out loud here, so I'm being careful. I could very nicely refute that whole chain of emails. And I remember seeing it, it's comparing apples and oranges. It's changing the act, and the province probably needs public support to deal with changing the act. And get the trust.
Also, the conversations with Peter Luckham, the chair of the trust.
Yeah.
He was more than willing to come with us to Victoria to renegotiate it. And it just never happened. I don't know how sincere it was, but
Well, I think
that would happen.
partly because we had the whole review process.
That's true too,
And there's
yeah.
no problem with reviewing it. I just don't want it to be attached to the election because it got so nasty.
Did we do the national part as part of the election? That's kind of having trouble remembering.
I think I'm quite determined this won't be, and hopefully these people are just screaming, let's leave the trust. My answer is no, read the press, we're going to renegotiate within the trust. This is a way of herding people away from that and to focus on what's important. It's the renegotiation of the funding within the trust. It's all about within the trust, and to take that conversation away from, oh, well, why aren't we leaving? It's not the conversation we're having. It's not what we're doing.
Well, then can I ask that last word act be taken out? Because right now, the motion as it reads says formula within the Islands Trust Act. It doesn't say formula within the Islands Trust, which I think is.
But it's
clear.
the act formula, which means we're not leaving the trust.
But it does say that in the first whereas at the top. Now, it says the requisition formula as per the Islands Trust Act, the Bowen Island has never been reviewed. So you've already got that in there.
If you read that last clause of it, it doesn't Bowen Island municipality was renegotiating with the province and the Islands Trust the annual tax requisition formula within the Islands Trust doesn't make sense. It's the Islands Trust Act.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you had thought about it again.
Yes, because we added the act, we added the word act as on Council Morse's advice.
Okay, Liam, we're gonna go to Liam and then we're gonna wrap this.
You could add an additional whereas, whereas at this time, Bowen Island municipality has no intention to consider leaving the trust. To that effect.
Well, we could add it to, if we're supporting them, it kind of would be self-evident that if we're supporting them, we're supportive of Trust and its request for provincial regarding an increase of its annual contribution and our ongoing membership.
And our ongoing membership is a good addition.
Yeah, and our ongoing. When I crafted this, every word was to try and avoid that pitfall of, oh, wait, one needs the trust. No, there's not one sentence, there's not one word which is going in there.
So how about changing that whereas to say, and whereas Bowen Island municipality as an ongoing member of the Islands Trust Federation will be supporting.
Yeah. So that actually reads more nicely. Yes. Sorry, did you get Sophie? You were having to be a magician at that end. Yeah. Okay, I think we're done, man.
Okay, so does everybody understand where we're at here? Okay, then
I'm not sure why I understand. I'm not sure I understand why it has to be at election time. If you ask this question,
Because it
that's
depends
the question.
do both and mail them out and all that stuff.
Yeah,
Well,
much
just
better. You're
had-
gonna get a
just
much
had-
better
we
response.
just had a survey.
Oh, yeah, 86 people.
Yeah, that's surveyed by the trust.
We have 900 people that's going to the elections. Who will answer the question, one way or the other? Yeah.
Well, I guess they could choose not to fill in the ballot.
Of course they can, of course they can, but it's.
It's just an easier way to reach everybody.
I share Sue Ellen's concerns about having this at the same time as an election. I think that the threat of encouraging divisiveness is very real. Bringing up the Islands Trust and the relationship. And we can dance our way around this resolution, but it's going to be a trigger. And rather avoid that trigger. And I
Maybe
also,
we need a trigger.
but I also would prefer, because this will be an ongoing negotiation, and impact the next council. I would like the next council to have some input into the timing of, when is appropriate to, ask this question. So I appreciate that we do need to have that conversation about the annual tax requisition. I don't support this resolution and this process. I think it's risky.
Yeah, so I've been listening. So I appreciate what you're trying to make this seem completely neutral, Michael, and I agree you have done. But what people do with information isn't always based on the information, it's based on some trigger that, aha, that's what this is about, sort of thing. And I'm very worried about doing it as part of the election as well. I agree, however, that we should be doing this. And I agree that we need to give our negotiators, Liam, we need to give ammunition. But I'm worried about doing it during an election for the reasons that we just heard. I don't want to vote against this because I agree with the work.
It won't survive unless it's on the election ballot. It won't survive.
Well, it could be.
Give it just a
It
second.
could go either way.
No, you can do opinion polls that are valid. Like to do it costs $2,000. You hire an opinion poll firm to do a valid survey of Bowen Island, and you could do it anytime. Doesn't need to be on the election. You can do it right now. It just costs you a little bit of money. That's all, and it'll be you can do it so that it's what is it? I used to know the math. How many? I can't remember how many it is, plus or minus, and all that sort of stuff. But you can do it.
Yeah, one I've seen this thing.
I agree.
If it's positive, but who knows what's going to be positive. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to, some of the material in the info sections there under 12.2 are the request from the Islands Trust itself to the province for a review of the whole Islands Trust. And that's somewhere where I think we could come in with our piggyback on that review that's been asked for by the 25 trustees that voted in favor of that. Was almost unanimous. And the request for a review. So if that review happens, I think that would be the window through which we could step with a better chance of success.
Very long bureaucratic process, and that may or may not come to anything. I mean, this is to gauge Bowen Island's support to renegotiate this, and I think it will help actually divert a lot of negative energy into something far more positive. And it may result in some explanations, it may result in conversations. And I don't mind that, and I think it's straightforward and it's honest. I will answer the questions honestly. I will take quite a lot of the heat for why aren't we leaving the trust? Well, we're not, we're doing this. So I'm prepared to take that on the neck, and this for me is a straightforward.
What we're trying to do is try to
It's a straightforward script for me to enunciate that very clearly, which I'm quite capable of doing. And it's because it's my wording, I own this.
So I guess the other thing is if the province increased their contribution and specifically earmarked it for the Conservancy, then that would reduce our contribution.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is what I said at council when it was meeting here a year or so ago. Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask Liam, on David's point, do a survey or moving it on to the election? Do you have any comment on that? And also on like my comment on not negotiating who, or not going out for public opinion thing and just saying, hey, let's negotiate. Do you feel you really need that piece to be able to negotiate with the Adults Trust, or can you do it without the province? With the province, without having to have that opinion survey in place?
There's no reason why we have to have the opinion to negotiate with the province. And so we can have those discussions. The opinion poll lends weight to the position that we would be arguing for, if it's in favor.
If it's in favor.
And the province would prefer to have that. It wouldn't necessarily be a requirement. Whether it's held during an election or not doesn't really matter. They won't. If you do a proper, you can do a referendum any time of year or opinion poll, and it won't, whether it's held on an election or not, that won't matter. And there's somebody raised the review that the Islands Trust has requested, which includes the funding mechanisms of the entire organization. That will be a very comprehensive, drawn out review that will take a couple of years at least. But I'll be honest with you, as I always am, if the province is considering a review that was requested by the trust, then they will not do our request separately.
Sorry?
If the province takes this request from the Islands Trust seriously and decides to do a comprehensive review, then they will just roll our request into it, and it won't be part of it. I don't think the province would do just our request and not the trust's request.
Yeah.
No, certainly not.
So I think that in light of the trust request, that there is a good opportunity that we would get a review of the tax requisition completed. An opinion poll would still be beneficial if it's the Islands Trust request going.
So in that last piece, what if we took out, so it would read, therefore be it resolved that a community opinion poll be held, skip it, not in conjunction with the 20 election, but to ask the Bowen Island community who supports the renegotiating of Bowen Island annual tax requisition. So we just take out the election part, we just say, we'll do the survey, we can do before then, and get the ball going even faster. We take out the election confusion and potential negativity there, classic. We're still doing the poll, right? We're still doing that. And there we go.
So we would commission this poll and we would leave Liam to come back with some details. What date would we do this at?
Do we have budget money?
You have a strategic initiative budget that has some unallocated funding in there, so we can find $2,000 in there.
How much? $2,000?
I'd say-
Councilor about.
I'd say a few $1,000s. I mean, we haven't done this for a few years, so I don't know what somebody would charge. It's.
Maybe we get the undercurrent to do.
Well, bad idea.
I hope it gets around. I mean, you know, this is, you're set right now.
Are you watching?
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to do that this summer, then I'm for that. You know, if it's done, then it's done before the election, but it's separate too. And it doesn't languish.
Yeah. I support that.
If I may,
Yes, please.
I do agree with Councillor Hawking's earlier statement around education and information, and I'm just concerned that none of this was on anybody's work plan. If it was part of the election ballot as a simple question as is, that's not very much work at all, but adding articles in the Edmonton Current or open houses or whatever additional information is.
We have to do that regardless.
We have to do with the election.
Not goes on the election.
But you know, but if it was just simple question on the, I mean, we can do it, but I'm just saying that that's, you know, an additional, chunk of work that we not really planned for.
So you could do an opinion poll where you have a couple of explanatory comments, you know, you explain, here's the situation. Yep. Here are some options. Do you prefer option B or option A? You know, that's typical poll. You can do something like that.
Yep.
Where you have enough information to explain, you know, roughly what you said in 3 sentences.
Yeah.
And if we have a good consultant, they can carry the load.
Yeah.
It should definitely be found out.
Yeah.
Definitely be found out.
Why did this in this last little bit of our term in the summer when people are looking forward to go fast and swimming at the beach, instead of,
I don't think that's
maybe
going
it's
to take up
slightly
too much
more?
of the time.
No, I'm thinking about staff vacations and staff time and, why wouldn't we leave this for the next council? Who would have to be dealing with that?
Yeah, that's it done before the election.
Are you okay with that, Terry?
If it's done before the election, absolutely. Yeah, and then you've got it separate too, and it's not.
And to David's point, I actually think it's easier to get that information out through the consultant who should actually go out. It's like, here's the points, or that's stuff to do in the middle of an election, where you get all these other issues being thrown in there. So it actually separates it and actually allows. I think it's a
Change your mail drop.
Yeah.
Question
Yeah.
and then follow up.
That's a tricky part.
Okay, if you got that,
Online.
a recommendation.
So what you have is.
So I have, therefore be it resolved that a community opinion will be held prior to the 2022 election to ask the vote on the community. And then the question.
Don't you think that would still be an election issue? Then we'll all be, whoever runs will be campaigning, could be campaigning while this question is hanging in the air.
It could just be, it could be held
I would not even put the election. Yeah.
December 2022.
Sure.
Well, summer's, when's the nomination period end?
September.
How quickly do you think you can get that out to?
I have no idea.
It's, I think a volunteer group is gonna have to write stuff. And getting it printed in the mail drop is easy. Well, how,
Just have the question, have it in the question.
Put out where they'll any communicate.
the information to go.
Explain it in the question. So you just have, you have 2 sentences, explain the situation, and then do you support?
So how will you going to get people to answer?
It's a public opinion. That's
I mean, you can't do it on a phone call. It's too much information to digest.
do it online, yeah.
Nominations in on the 9th.
So prior to September the 9th.
Sorry for this taking so long, because it's really important.
It's very important. There's no question.
Anyone need, actually, I want to extend.
Okay. Second, I guess, thanks. And I'll second that. No one in a second, sorry, Michael, one favor.
This is a vote to extend. Did anybody vote over there?
Yeah.
So therefore, we're left now with an external consultancy to do this prior to the election.
Oh, I think it has to be prior to the close of nomination.
That's too fast.
September 9th.
I mean, you gotta hire somebody, you gotta choose a firm.
We don't have to put that in there though, right? As long as we know we're doing that right now, right?
Well, I think his point is that it's not practical.
It's, you know, you've got to choose a firm. Normally, I've done it in the past, put it up RFP and all that kind of stuff. Whatever, request.
Or do we just do a survey monkey question and people that way?
Do what, sorry?
Use survey monkey.
Do it internally.
Do it internally. So it's an online and people go and
Look at the announcement and the undercurrent.
So if I were receiving that as a member of government, I would give it any credit.
Well, it depends on how many people.
Yeah,
I can just see this on.
This has got so convoluted. We just wanted to put it on the election ballot as a simple question, not wishing and having worded it so carefully, because it was just straightforward and it gave some weight to the discussion. And it may not have been perfect, but you can see how convoluted it gets when we move away from that mainstream idea. And so in a way, I think I'm trying to pull it back by saying, this is going to work. This is our time to do it. And this is the way we can put it on. And we've chosen our wording so very carefully that really, you know, I'm sorry if some people want to run them up, but they'll do that anyway, with whatever question. And I'm hoping that the value of the clarification will outweigh any opportunity to make mischief.
Okay, sorry, one more question. Hate to prolong things. In terms of timing, why did it happen? I know, okay, so the trust is asking the province to do this, so we want to get it in now while the province is thinking about that. Is that right? Or could we do it a little bit later when the province is saying, yeah, we're going to look at this?
We don't know what the reaction will be from the province. Seriously, I mean, that was sent out through the, by the time this, it could be a couple of years process. This is definitely to get the feeling, at least from the island, on this subject, and then the cars will fall whichever way they way, because otherwise we'll be up in sort of ether land somewhere. And frankly, I'd like to, I know it's awkward and I accept the comments made, but actually I'd like to kind of put it on the vote. Let people vote with the explanation. They've got the whereases, they can see what we're trying to support and move forward on. And for all of us, there's a script here in the whereases of what we're trying to achieve. So and that's what we'll publish so people can see very clearly. Because there's not some subterfuge about leaving the trust. It is.
Whereas it won't be in the actual vote, but
No,
it will be in what we publish.
It will be in what we publish and discuss, yes. Okay. So if I may, I'd like to revert back to the original and so, because otherwise I think we'll just lose the drift. And I think it's David, I so appreciate the comments, but I think it'll just get lost. And I can see Liam's face going, oh my God, everybody's away. We're trying to get stuff done. We've got one meeting at the 20th, whatever, in September. It's going to get lost. It's all going to fall between. And then the people who wrote those things, let's leave it. This is designed to tidy up a loose end prior to the you can see that far more strongly than I do as trying to cause a disruptive element.
It's not about getting out of the trust. It's just about looking at this requisition. This is the most efficient way to get an opinion poll on that question. And I think that's so that was a concern. I mean, that's obviously.
Could you just go back to where we were?
Yeah, so it's therefore be it resolved that a community opinion poll be held in conjunction with the October 15th, 2022 election to ask the Bowen Island community, do you support Bowen Island municipality renegotiating with the province and the island's trust, Bowen Island's annual tax requisition formula, island's trust tax.
Yeah, there we are. And we have an early whereas which talks about being a member and
being a member of the federation.
Yeah, you have that.
An ongoing member of the federation.
An ongoing member of the federation.
Maybe we could take it.
Okay, so did you move it?
Yes. Okay. You moved it in second. Maureen?
The second whereas the entity derived purely from the formula and with no input or consultation with the municipality. That's not quite correct, is it?
Yes, but the act was amended before we had any incorporation books. It was all done pre-incorporation, might have been done when they put in the concept of island municipalities. And that was between two of our votes.
But that whereas is talking about a specific tax requisition of 30 $320,000. And we did have an opportunity to.
Oh, I see what you're
Right,
doing.
right.
Yeah.
In that context,
So I think it makes more sense to say derive purely from the formula and there,
Yes.
because otherwise it's going to rip. some-
Yeah, okay, I concur. Yeah. Thank you, I agree, but no, I appreciate it because that's, the idea is to be absolutely not abrasive. This is the other treatment. This is a spa treatment.
Well, in that case, can we hurry up and go home? So we can
Yeah,
have-
it's okay, so further discussion. Okay, last question, in favor? Okay, thank you, opposed? It's your faster.
And
Oh, sorry, Maureen, I thought you went up on the first one. So okay. Thank you. CAO update, Liam, it was CAO. And you got Liam. So we're really, yeah, we're gonna want to listen now. Yeah.
so I just want to make all of council aware that we are having a conversation with the CEO of the Municipal Finance Authority tomorrow. And we'll be reaching out to other local governments about what their investment strategies are with their investment dollars. You know, local governments are not immune to the fluctuations of the market and the volatility of especially the long-term bond markets has been pretty abysmal of late. And so we're wanting to make sure that we've got the best information we can have in thinking about how we might invest the money that we have available for investment. And so just bringing you aware of that.
Okay.
Make sure you're aware of that. And then also, I would like to suggest that, you know, since this is our last meeting before the summer break, you know, as you always are very responsive, if we do need your assistance on things, we will be reaching out by email or vice versa. But I would also suggest that we set up a pre-meeting for discussing what our minister meetings would be like. We did that last year. With those meetings that we get approval for, which we won't find out until late August. Okay. So I'll be reaching out. So look to your emails late August. I'll be reaching out to you about setting that up. And then also just to note that I have hip surgery scheduled for September 20th.
Yay!
And so I will be in Victoria that week. So that's the week after the UBCM.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah.
And
oh, that's
so
great news.
I'll be probably working from home for a couple of weeks after, but I'll be on deck still. And then also just a last note that I'll be away next week and hope will be acting
okay.
CAO.
Next week.
Next week.
Surprise.
Oh, I thought she was, okay, well, I'll sort that out. Kristen is away as well. So. Daniel, what are you doing now? Okay, that's it.
Okay, thanks, Liam. Update Council Metro Vancouver business. Director, David Hockey, nothing? Okay, thank you. Update Council on Island Trust business. Municipal trustees, Fast and Gale.
Nothing.
Nothing.
I'll just say, yeah, I'm going to be in a meeting with Denman Island on the Wednesday about updating their farm regulations, and there's lots of good info there because it's all, we've got a consultant there, so I'll spread some links. If anybody wants to know, let me know. And otherwise, Islands Trust is calming down for the summer as well.
Okay. And
there's tons of information, but I already mentioned all that.
thank you. Update Council on Metro Vancouver Regional Parks Committee meetings. Councilor Nicholson.
I have a very exciting tour of the Iona Island leased water.
Water treatment plants. You have it already? Yeah, no, it's great.
Kind of fun.
It's coming up.
It's coming up.
What did
Look
they do
forward
for
to
the project?
Bring your
About
lunch.
the project or just plan? Sorry? Is it about the reclamation project, the nature reclamation project, or is it about?
It's
the new
another
plant?
wastewater treatment plant.
Yeah, I had that tour like 40 years ago, it's probably.
I'm glad that you're in the data that I have been looking at.
What is that have to do with the park?
Because it's park land.
They're needing to call some of the park back. Yeah. To expand the plan.
Oh,
Okay, that's it, Marty. That's your future and update council and translate to mayor's council meetings, Councilor Allison.
I don't think we're having a meeting, but it's entirely a closed meeting. And that's the only other thing was there was a big announcement from the province. News release and press announcement about the Great Island, which was last week.
That it's happening.
Yeah. There were some funny statements in there. Hopefully we'll get more. For a month, right, whatever, Thursday, what day is this month?
Yeah, what is this? I think it's called 9:50.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a wrap. It's a question period. I don't see anybody here. And you know, any questions? On that note, I am happy to adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much, everybody.